The sound of automatic gunfire echoed across the valley, bullets pinging off rocks, as 6 Navy SEALs huddled behind a low stone wall. Their position had been compromised, their extraction point under heavy fire. Trapped in a deadly crossfire, the elite warriors were running out of options. "Command, this is Eagle 6, Lieutenant Commander Richards shouted into his radio over the deafening gunfire. "We are pinned down multiple hostiles requesting immediate air support." The radio crackled with static before a voice responded. "Eagle 6 nearest air support is 20 minutes out. Hold position." Richards looked at his men, their faces grim with the understanding that 20 minutes might as well be an eternity. The Taliban fighters were closing in from 3 directions. "Sir, we've got movement on the ridge 800 meters east." His second-in-command reported, pointing to a rocky outcropping where several armed figures were maneuvering to higher ground. If they reached that position, the SEALs would be completely exposed. "If those bastards get up there, we're finished," Richards muttered, calculating their diminishing odds of survival. That's when it happened. The first shot came without warning, a sharp crack that momentarily rose above the chaos of battle. One of the fighters on the distant ridge suddenly dropped. Before his companions could react, a second shot rang out. Another fighter fell, then a third, each shot placed with surgical precision. The Taliban fighters scrambled for cover, their advance halted by an invisible threat. More shots followed in a steady, methodical rhythm. Each round found its mark with uncanny accuracy despite the extreme range and swirling mountain winds. "Who the hell is that?" one of the SEALs whispered as they watched their attackers being systematically eliminated by the unseen marksman. The radio crackled to life again, but with a different voice, calm, measured, almost detached from the life-and-death struggle unfolding below. "Eagle 6, this is Ghost Eye. I've cleared your northern exfil route. You have a 60-second window. Move now." The SEALs exchanged glances of disbelief. The voice didn't belong to any support team they knew about. But as the Taliban fighters continued to fall with each precise shot, Richards made his decision. "You heard, Ghost Eye. We move now. Go, go, go." The 6 SEALs broke cover and sprinted toward the extraction point as their mysterious guardian angel continued to provide covering fire from some unseen perch high above the valley. As they reached safety, Richards keyed his radio once more. "Ghost Eye, whoever you are, thank you." There was a long pause before the voice responded. "Just doing my job, Commander. Ghost Eye out." What none of the SEALs knew as they boarded their extraction helicopter was the true identity of their savior, or the extraordinary journey that had brought Ghost Eye to that remote Afghan mountainside. A journey that had begun 18 months earlier with a young woman no one believed could ever become one of America's deadliest weapons. Coronado Naval Base, California, 18 months earlier. Emily Walker stood perfectly still at the edge of the parade ground, her small frame seeming almost childlike next to the 24 men gathered for the first day of the Scout Sniper School. At 22 years old, 5'2" and barely 110 pounds, she looked more like someone who had taken a wrong turn on a campus tour than a candidate for one of the military's most elite and physically demanding specialties. The San Diego morning sun beat down on the assembled group as they waited in formation. Emily felt the sideways glances, heard the barely concealed snickers. She'd expected this, had prepared for it, but the reality still stung. She kept her eyes forward and face impassive, refusing to acknowledge the silent judgment. The base loudspeakers announced the morning colors as the American flag rose against the blue California sky. In the distance, the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly, its surface glittering under the morning sun. Aircraft from the nearby air station roared overhead, a reminder of America's military might. But here on this patch of asphalt, Emily Walker was fighting a more personal battle, one against perception. A door slammed open and 3 men emerged from the administration building. The central figure, a square-jawed officer with salt and pepper hair cropped close to his scalp, walked with the confident stride of someone accustomed to command. Flanking him were 2 senior non-commissioned officers, their weathered faces testaments to years of service in harsh environments. "Attention," called the candidate at the head of the formation. 25 pairs of boots snapped together as the group stood rigidly at attention. Captain Frank Harrison approached, his cold blue eyes surveying each candidate with calculating precision. When his gaze fell on Emily, it lingered a moment longer, his expression revealing nothing but professional assessment. "At ease," he ordered, and the formation shifted to parade rest. "I am Captain Harrison, commanding officer of this Scout Sniper School. These are your primary instructors, Master Sergeant James Blackwood and Sergeant First Class Ryan Miller. Emily studied the two NCOs. Blackwood was older, perhaps in his mid-50s, with the lean, weathered look of a career soldier. His face bore the fine lines of someone who had spent years squinting through rifle scopes in harsh sunlight. Miller was younger, mid-30s at most, with the coiled intensity of a predator. His gaze, when it landed on Emily, hardened into undisguised skepticism. You have been selected to attempt one of the most challenging training programs in the United States military, Harrison continued. Many of you will not make it through the next 12 weeks. Scout snipers represent the pinnacle of tactical precision and battlefield intelligence. We are not interested in creating adequate snipers. We are here to create exceptional ones. Harrison paced before the formation, his voice projecting across the parade ground. The modern battlefield demands warriors who can engage targets with surgical precision from extraordinary distances, who can remain undetected for days while gathering intelligence, who can endure physical and mental stress that would break ordinary soldiers. He stopped directly in front of Emily, his eyes boring into hers. Each of you will be pushed beyond what you believe are your limits. Some of you will discover that you do not have what it takes. Others will find strengths they never knew they possessed. Emily met his gaze unflinchingly, her green eyes steady despite the implicit challenge. Harrison turned away, addressing the entire group once more. You were all chosen because your records indicate potential, but potential means nothing without performance. Starting today, your past accomplishments are irrelevant. You will be judged solely on your actions here. He nodded to Sergeant Miller, who stepped forward with a clipboard. Fall out to the quartermaster's office to draw your initial equipment. Sergeant Miller will assign your barracks. First formation for physical evaluation is at 0600 tomorrow. Dismissed. As the group dispersed, Miller approached Emily, his expression a mask of barely concealed disdain. Walker, he said, scanning his clipboard. I assume there's been some kind of administrative error. Emily stood straighter. No error, Sergeant. Miller's eyes narrowed. The Scout Sniper program is not a social experiment, Walker. This isn't some checkbox for the Pentagon's diversity goals. I'm not here for politics, Sergeant. I'm here to become a sniper. A humorless smile creased Miller's face. Are you now? Well, I admire your optimism. He looked down at his clipboard again. You've been assigned to Barracks B Bunk 14. I suggest you enjoy the accommodations while they last. I give you 3 days before you're on a transport back to wherever they found you. Emily remained expressionless, though she felt her cheeks burn. Is that all, Sergeant? Miller leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. This program breaks men twice your size, Walker. What exactly do you think you're doing here? Before she could respond, a gravelly voice interrupted from behind her. Problem here, Sergeant Miller. Master Sergeant Blackwood had approached silently, his weathered face unreadable as he assessed the situation. Miller straightened. No problem, Master Sergeant. Just clarifying the candidate's billeting assignment. Blackwood's pale blue eyes shifted to Emily. Unlike Miller's open hostility, Blackwood's gaze held something more complex, a calculating assessment tinged with something that might have been curiosity. Walker, isn't it? He asked. Yes, Master Sergeant. He studied her for a long moment, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. The quartermaster might not have equipment in your size. Report to my office at 1600 hours. We'll sort it out. Thank you, Master Sergeant. Blackwood nodded once, then turned to Miller. A word, Sergeant. The two men walked away, leaving Emily alone on the parade ground. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what lay ahead. Day one, and already the mountain seemed impossibly high. But Emily Walker had not come this far to be deterred by doubt, either her own or anyone else's. The barracks were exactly as Emily had expected, utilitarian, impersonal, and designed with male occupants in mind. As she placed her few belongings in the wall locker beside her bunk, she felt the stares of the other candidates. Some were openly hostile, others merely curious, but all carried the same unspoken question. What was she doing here? A tall, broad-shouldered candidate approached, standing at the foot of her bunk with arms crossed. So you're the girl sniper we've been hearing about, he said, his southern accent thick with mockery. Thought it was just a rumor until now. Emily continued organizing her gear, not bothering to look up. And you are Thompson, Robert Thompson, 3 tours in Afghanistan with 1st Recon. He glanced at the other men gathering around. We're just wondering if you know what you signed up for, sweetheart. This isn't like other programs. They're not going to lower the standards because you've got different plumbing." Now Emily did look up, her green eyes hard. "Good. I'd be insulted if they did." Thompson laughed, a sound without humor. "You hear that, boy? She'd be insulted." He leaned forward. "Listen, honey, I've seen what happens downrange when someone can't pull their weight. People die. So why don't you save everyone some time? And, is there a problem here?" The voice came from behind Thompson. A slender Asian-American candidate stood in the barracks doorway, his expression neutral, but his posture suggesting he was prepared to intervene. Thompson straightened. "No problem at all, Chen. Just welcoming our new colleague." Chen walked forward, positioning himself subtly between Thompson and Emily's bunk. "Then I'm sure you're done with the Welcome Committee Act. We've got equipment issue in 10 minutes. With a final skeptical glance at Emily, Thompson and his followers moved away. Chen turned to Emily, offering a slight nod. "Michael Chen," he said simply. "They're like that with all the new people. Don't take it personally." "Emily Walker, and I've dealt with worse." Chen's eyes reflected a knowing understanding. As the only Asian American in the candidate class, he likely had his own experiences with being the outsider. "Word of advice," he said quietly. "First week is designed to weed out the weakest candidates. They'll be watching you extra close, looking for any excuse. Don't give them one." Before Emily could respond, the barracks door banged open and Sergeant Miller strode in. "Quartermaster now, move it, candidates." As the group filed out, Emily caught a glimpse of herself in the small mirror above her footlocker. The face that stared back was young, but determined, framed by dark hair pulled into a tight regulation bun. Her father's eyes, that distinctive Walker green, looked back at her with the same intensity she remembered from childhood. For a moment, she allowed herself to remember his words from long ago. "Those eyes are a sniper's best asset, Emmy. They see what others miss." She squared her shoulders and followed the others out. Her father had been right about many things. She intended to prove he was right about her, too. Later that night, when the barracks had finally quieted, Emily removed a worn photograph from between the pages of a manual. In the dim light that filtered through the windows, she studied the image, a tall man in desert camouflage, standing beside a teenage girl, both holding rifles at a firing range. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Walker, United States Army Special Forces, had been one of the most respected snipers in modern military history. 87 confirmed kills in Iraq and Afghanistan. A legend. Her father. Next to the first photo was a second, newer one, a young man in navy dress blues, his face so similar to her own that they could only be siblings. Lieutenant David Walker, Navy SEAL, had followed in their father's footsteps, until 2 years ago when his team had been ambushed in the mountains of Afghanistan. Only 3 of the 8-man unit had returned alive. David wasn't one of them. Emily touched the photos gently before returning them to their hiding place. She hadn't told anyone here about her family, hadn't mentioned that marksmanship was in her blood, that she'd fired her first rifle at age 8, that her father had trained both his children in the art of precision shooting before she'd learned algebra. She didn't want special treatment because of her name. If anything, it would only raise expectations to impossible heights. How could the daughter of Robert Walker, barely half his size, ever live up to such a legacy? No, she would make her own way, prove herself on her own merits. And perhaps then she could fulfill the promise she'd made at 2 gravesides to honor their memory by becoming something they would have been proud of. As sleep finally claimed her, Emily's last thoughts were of the challenges that awaited at tomorrow's first light. The physical trials would be brutal for someone her size. But Emily Walker had not come to Coronado to fail. She had come to become something that most people, including the 24 men sleeping around her, believed impossible: a woman who could stand among the deadliest snipers in military history. The physical evaluation began in darkness. At 0600, the candidates stood shivering in the pre-dawn chill of the California coastline, dressed in PT gear, as Sergeant Miller paced before them like a prowling tiger. "The modern battlefield demands more than just shooting skills," Miller barked. "A sniper must be able to infiltrate hostile territory, remain hidden for days, and exfiltrate under adverse conditions. That requires exceptional physical endurance." He pointed to the beach visible in the distance. 20-mile ruck march. Full combat load, 35 pounds in your packs. You have 5 hours to complete the course. Anyone who fails to finish in time is done. Anyone who falls out is done. Anyone who lightens their load is done. Emily felt a flutter of apprehension. 35 pounds represented nearly a third of her body weight, a far greater relative burden than for the men. Miller knew this. It was by design. Begin, the group moved out, jogging toward the beach access path. Emily settled into the middle of the pack, conserving energy. She had trained for this, spent months conditioning her smaller frame to handle disproportionate loads. Still within the first mile, the weight began to dig into her shoulders, the sand shifting treacherously beneath her feet. By mile 5, the group had spread out along the shoreline. The front runners, Thompson among them, were already small figures in the distance. Emily maintained a steady pace, ignoring the burning in her thighs and the growing pressure on her shoulders. Each step required conscious effort, a battle against physics and biology. Chen appeared beside her, his breathing controlled but labored. "Doing okay, Walker?" he asked between breaths. "Never better," she managed, though her shoulders screamed in protest. They continued in companionable silence for another mile before Chen spoke again. "Why are you really here? Most people don't volunteer for this kind of punishment without a reason." Emily considered deflecting the question, but decided on a partial truth. "Same as anyone else. Wanted to be the best at something that matters." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Fair enough, though I'm guessing there's more to it." Before she could respond, they rounded a bend to find Miller waiting at a checkpoint, stopwatch in hand. His eyes narrowed as he watched Emily approach, clearly surprised she had made it this far. 13 minutes behind pace, Walker," he said as she passed. "You'll need to pick it up if you want to finish in time." Emily didn't waste breath on a response, focusing instead on maintaining her momentum. As she and Chen continued down the beach, she sensed Miller's eyes following her, waiting for the inevitable failure. By mile 15, Emily's world had narrowed to the next step, then the next. Her pack felt like it contained concrete rather than standard gear. Each footfall in the soft sand required monumental effort. Several candidates had already dropped out, sitting dejectedly along the route as the remainder trudged past. Emily's lungs burned. Her legs trembled. But still, she moved forward, one excruciating step after another. She had fallen to the back third of the group now, with only a few stragglers behind her. Chen had pulled ahead, though he occasionally looked back to check on her progress. Through the haze of exhaustion, Emily recalled her father's words during a particularly grueling hunting trip when she was 16. "Pain is just information, Emmy. Acknowledge it, then set it aside. The body gives up long before it needs to. The mind decides when you're truly finished." Mile 18 found her alone on the beach, the other candidates now out of sight ahead and behind. The sun had risen fully, its heat intensifying her discomfort. Sweat soaked her uniform, and her vision occasionally blurred. But still, she placed one foot before the other again and again. When the final checkpoint came into view, Emily was surprised to see not Miller but Master Sergeant Blackwood, waiting, his weathered face impassive as he watched her approach. She stumbled, the final 100 yards, legs nearly giving out as she crossed the finish line. Blackwood checked his watch. 4 hours, 52 minutes. "You made it with 8 minutes to spare, Walker." Emily bent over, the hands on knees, too exhausted to respond. When she finally straightened, she found Blackwood studying her with that same unreadable expression from the previous day. 21 candidates completed the march," he said. 4 didn't make it. You came in 20th place." Emily nodded, accepting the assessment without complaint. "Most candidates your size wouldn't have finished at all." Blackwood added something like approval flickering across his features. "Report to the medical officer for hydration assessment, then clean up. Marksmanship evaluation begins at 1400 hours." As Emily limped toward the medical tent, she allowed herself a small measure of satisfaction. She had survived the first cut. 21 remained from 25. And despite finishing near the back, she had finished, which was exactly what Miller and many others had expected her to fail to do. The real test, however, still lay ahead. Physical endurance was important, but it wasn't why she had come to Coronado. Emily Walker had come to shoot. And in just a few hours, she would have her chance to show what a lifetime of preparation had built toward. The firing range at Coronado stretched out before the remaining candidates' targets, positioned at various distances from 100 to 800 yards. A steady ocean breeze blew across the range, carrying the tang of salt and creating the variable wind conditions that separated adequate marksmen from exceptional ones. Emily stood in line with the others as Blackwood paced before them, gesturing to the weapon racks. The M40A5 is the primary sniper rifle of Marine Scout snipers, he explained, lifting one of the long heavy weapons. 7.62 millimeter NATO round, effective range of 1,000 yards in the hands of a skilled shooter. Today's evaluation will determine your baseline proficiency. He handed the rifle to the first candidate in line. 5 rounds at each distance. We're looking for grouping and accuracy under varying wind conditions. When Emily's turn came, Miller stepped forward, a skeptical expression on his face. He held out the rifle, all 14 pounds of precisely machined steel and composite materials. "This might be a bit much for you to handle, Walker," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Several nearby candidates snickered. Emily took the weapon without comment. The length of the rifle was indeed awkward for her smaller frame, the stock designed for men with longer arms and broader shoulders. But she had anticipated this and had spent months practicing with similar weapons, developing adaptations to her shooting stance that compensated for the mismatch. At the firing line, she went through her preparation methodically. While other candidates settled quickly into position, Emily took extra time adjusting her stance, finding the optimal cheek weld despite the oversized stock. She noted the wind flags fluttering at various distances, mentally calculating the necessary adjustments. Beside her, Thompson completed his first 5-shot group at 100 yards, the target showing a tight cluster near center mass. He glanced at Emily with a smirk as he cycled his bolt. "Ladies first," he offered with mock courtesy. Emily ignored him, focusing instead on her breathing. She inhaled deeply, then released half her breath, finding that space of perfect stillness between heartbeats. Her finger took up the slack in the trigger. The rifle cracked the recoil, driving into her shoulder. Without rushing, she cycled the bolt, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a new round. 4 more times she repeated the process, each shot delivered with the same methodical precision. When the range officer called for a ceasefire to check targets, Miller strode down range, binoculars in hand. He stopped at Emily's target, stared for a long moment, then continued to the others. When he returned, his expression had shifted from skepticism to something less easily defined. "Results for the 100-yard evaluation," he announced. "Thompson, Chen, Ramirez, all 5s in the 10 ring. Walker." He paused and Emily braced herself for criticism. 5 shots through the same hole. Perfect score. A murmur ran through the group. 1-hole groups at 100 yards were uncommon even among experienced shooters. To achieve it on an evaluation with an unfamiliar weapon was exceptional. Thompson's smirk faded, replaced by a look of disbelief. "Beginner's luck," he muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Move to the 200-yard line," Blackwood ordered, cutting off any further comments. But as the candidates repositioned, Emily noticed him watching her with new interest. The pattern repeated at 200 yards, then 400. Emily's groups remained exceptionally tight, her shots finding their mark with a consistency that could no longer be attributed to luck. By the time they reached the 600-yard line, a tense silence had fallen over the other candidates. They watched as Emily settled behind her rifle, her small body seemingly dwarfed by the weapon, yet in perfect harmony with it. The wind had picked up now, gusting unpredictably across the range. Emily studied the flags intently, making minute adjustments to her position. When she fired, her shots continued to group tightly, despite conditions that had caused other candidates' groups to widen considerably. At 800 yards, nearly half a mile, the full challenge of long-distance marksmanship revealed itself. At this range, the bullet would drop more than 12 feet from the line of sight. Wind drift could push it several feet left or right. The curvature of the earth itself became a factor. Only 8 of the remaining 21 candidates managed to put all 5 rounds on target. Emily was one of them. When the final ceasefire was called, Blackwood personally inspected her target. Her 5 shots had grouped within a 3-inch circle, extraordinary accuracy at that distance. When he returned to the firing line, he found Miller already examining Emily's rifle, as if searching for some modification or trick that could explain her performance. "Master Sergeant," Miller said quietly, "this level of accuracy from a first-day shooter is exceptional." Blackwood finished his tone, making it clear the discussion was over. He turned to address the candidates. "Preliminary marksmanship assessment is complete. Clean your weapons and report to Classroom 3 at 1700 for academic orientation." As the group dispersed, Blackwood approached Emily, who was meticulously cleaning her rifle. "Where did you learn to shoot like that, Walker?" he asked, his voice low enough that others couldn't hear. Emily continued her work, not looking up. My father taught me, Master Sergeant. And your father was... Now she did look up, meeting his gaze directly. A hunter. Sir. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. Her father had been a hunter, among other things. Blackwood studied her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. 20 years training snipers, Walker and I've rarely seen natural talent like what you displayed today. But talent alone isn't enough in this program. Remember that. He walked away, leaving Emily to wonder how much he suspected about her background. She resumed cleaning her rifle, aware that her performance had changed the dynamic. The other candidates were now viewing her with a complex mixture of respect, suspicion, and in some cases resentment. She had proven she could shoot remarkably well, but had also painted a target on her back in the process. The irony wasn't lost on her. In becoming a sniper, she had made herself a target. The academic classroom was Spartan white walls, hard chairs, and a projector screen at the front. Captain Harrison stood before the assembled candidates, hands clasped behind his back. Marksmanship is only part of what makes an effective sniper, he began. The modern sniper is also an intelligence gatherer, a force multiplier, and often the eyes and ears of command. This requires exceptional observational skills and the ability to apply complex calculations under pressure. He activated the projector, displaying a series of mathematical formulas. Ballistics, wind calculation, range estimation, minute of angle adjustments. These are the tools that translate precision marksmanship into battlefield effectiveness. For the next 2 hours, the candidates received a crash course in the mathematics of long-distance shooting. While some struggled with the complex formulas, Emily found herself comfortably familiar with the material. Her father had drilled these calculations into her since childhood, often turning family hunting trips into practical lessons in external ballistics. When Harrison distributed the preliminary assessment test, Emily completed it in half the allotted time. The problems calculating bullet drop at various distances, determining windage adjustments for crosswinds, estimating the effect of humidity and temperature on trajectories were challenging but well within her capabilities. As she turned in her paper, Harrison raised an eyebrow at her early completion. Confident in your answers, Walker. Yes, sir. We'll see. Results tomorrow at morning formation. The next day dawned with a new intensity to the training regimen. The morning began with combat swimming, a grueling session in the cold Pacific waters that tested even the strongest candidates. Emily's smaller body mass worked against her in the frigid ocean, her core temperature dropping more rapidly than her larger counterparts. By the time they emerged from the water for the 2-mile beach run that followed, her limbs were numb, her movements sluggish. She finished the run in last place, drawing a contemptuous look from Miller. Falling behind already, Walker? I told you this program wasn't designed for Sergeant Miller. Blackwood's voice interrupted as he approached with a sheaf of papers. The academic assessment results. Miller took the offered papers, scanning the top sheet. His expression shifted from satisfaction to disbelief. This can't be right, he muttered. I checked the calculations myself, Blackwood replied. Perfect score on the ballistics assessment. Only one in the class. Miller's eyes found Emily standing exhausted but attentive among the other candidates. Who was it? Walker. The revelation sent a ripple through the assembled group. Thompson, who had been smirking at Emily's physical performance, now looked stunned. Chen offered a small nod of acknowledgement. Candidates, Blackwood addressed the group. Physical conditioning continues this afternoon. Obstacle course at 1300. Dismissed. As the others filed away, Miller remained staring at the assessment results with obvious displeasure. Something's not right here, he said to Blackwood when they were alone. Nobody walks in and aces both marksmanship and ballistics on day one. She had to have had specialized training. Blackwood's weathered face revealed nothing. You think she's cheating? I think there's more to Walker than she's telling us. If you're suggesting she doesn't belong in this program, that's exactly what I'm suggesting, Miller interrupted. This isn't about gender, Master Sergeant. It's about capability. She barely finished the ruck march. She was last in the ocean swim. What happens when she's carrying a spotter's pack through mountain terrain for 3 days? What happens when a mission requires physical strength she doesn't possess? Blackwood considered this, his pale eyes thoughtful. Valid concerns, but her shooting scores and theoretical knowledge are exceptional. Perhaps exceptional enough to warrant finding ways to overcome the physical limitations. Miller shook his head. We don't lower standards, Master Sergeant. Not for anyone. No, we don't, Blackwood agreed. But we do adapt training to develop each candidate's strengths while addressing their weaknesses. That's always been the philosophy of this program. And if her weaknesses can't be addressed, Blackwood's expression hardens slightly. Then she'll wash out like any other candidate who can't meet the standard. But she deserves the chance to prove herself, same as everyone else. Miller conceded with a reluctant nod, though his expression suggested the matter was far from settled. What neither man knew as they parted ways was that Emily Walker had overheard their entire conversation from just around the corner of the building. She leaned against the wall, eyes closed, absorbing the reality of the challenge before her. Miller's doubts were the same ones that had haunted her since she'd first considered this path. The same ones she'd heard from every advisor and superior who'd reviewed her application. Too small, too weak, not built for it. She pushed away from the wall, squaring her shoulders despite the fatigue that weighed on her limbs. They were right about the physical challenges. She couldn't change her size or natural strength, but she could adapt, compensate, find ways to accomplish the same objectives through different means. That afternoon on the obstacle course, Emily approached each challenge with strategic calculation rather than brute force. Where others powered over walls, she used technique and momentum. Where they muscled through barriers, she found efficient paths that required less raw strength. She still finished near the back of the pack, but she finished defying the expectations of many who had anticipated her failure. Day by day, the routine intensified. Candidates who couldn't keep pace began to drop out, first two, then three more by the end of the first week. Emily endured adapting, improving incrementally in the physical challenges while continuing to excel in marksmanship and academics. Chen became an unlikely ally, occasionally offering advice on technique or equipment modifications that might better suit her frame. In return, Emily helped him refine his shooting stance, sharing insights gleaned from years of practice. It wasn't friendship, exactly the competitive nature of the program discouraged close bonds, but it was a mutually beneficial partnership amid an increasingly grueling selection process. By the beginning of week 2, 16 candidates remained from the original 25. Emily Walker, against all expectations, was still among them. The revelation came during the land navigation exercise. The candidates had been dropped in pairs at different points within a vast training area, given coordinates and ordered to navigate to a series of checkpoints using only map, compass, and terrain features. Emily had been paired with Chen, their compatibility as a team now recognized by the instructors. They had successfully located 3 of their 5 assigned checkpoints when they encountered Thompson and his partner Ramirez struggling with a particularly challenging waypoint in dense woodland. "Coordinates don't match the terrain features," Thompson was saying as Emily and Chen approached. "The hill should be right here, but—" He broke off when he noticed them, his expression souring. "Walker, lost already." "We found 3 checkpoints," Emily replied neutrally, "working on our 4th. Thompson snorted. "Well, don't expect any help from us. This isn't a group project." Chen studied their map, then glanced at the surrounding terrain. "Your declination might be off," he suggested. "East of the Mississippi you add, west you subtract." Thompson's face flushed. "I know how to adjust for magnetic declination, Chen." "I'm not an idiot." "Just trying to help," Chen replied with a shrug. As the 2 men continued their heated exchange, Emily noticed something, a manila folder protruding from Thompson's rucksack, her name clearly visible on the tab. Her blood ran cold. Personnel files were supposed to be confidential, accessible only to instructors and command staff. There was only one way Thompson could have obtained it. She caught Chen's eye nodding subtly toward the folder. His expression shifted as he recognized the implications. "We should move on," he said quietly. "Daylight's burning." They departed, leaving Thompson and Ramirez to their navigation problems. When they were well out of earshot, Chen turned to Emily. "He shouldn't have that file. That's a serious breach of protocol." Emily nodded, mind racing. If Thompson had accessed her personnel records, he likely knew everything: her father, her brother, her family. History of elite marksmanship. "I need to know what's in it," she said. "How much he knows?" Chen looked troubled. "Whatever it is, he'll use it against you. Thompson's been gunning for you since day 1. Finding out you have some kind of special background will only make him worse." Emily knew he was right. Thompson had been looking for any excuse to discredit her performance. Learning she came from a family of distinguished military snipers would provide perfect ammunition, an accusation that she had hidden her background to gain special treatment, or alternatively, that she had been admitted to the program solely because of her family name rather than merit. Either way, the revelation threatened to undermine everything she had worked for. Let's finish the exercise, she decided. Deal with Thompson later. But as they continued their navigation, Emily couldn't shake the sense of impending confrontation. By the time they returned to the base that evening, completing the exercise with all 5 checkpoints, verified her apprehension had crystallized into certainty. Thompson wouldn't sit on this information. He would use it, and soon. The opportunity came the following morning during classroom instruction on counter-sniper tactics. As Master Sergeant Blackwood discussed the methods used by enemy forces to locate and neutralize American snipers, Thompson raised his hand. Master Sergeant, how significant is institutional knowledge in countering enemy tactics? For instance, if someone had family members with extensive combat sniper experience, wouldn't that give them an advantage in understanding these concepts? The question seemed innocuous, but the pointed look Thompson directed at Emily made his intention clear. Blackwood considered the question. Institutional knowledge certainly has value, but each conflict presents unique challenges. What worked in Vietnam might get you killed in Afghanistan. Experience must be adapted to current conditions. Thompson nodded, not finished. And what about candidates who might have access to specialized training before entering the program? Seems like that would create an uneven playing field. Now Blackwood's eye narrowed slightly, sensing the subtext. This program evaluates candidates based on performance, not background. Previous experience may provide initial advantage, but sustained excellence requires more than inherited knowledge. Thompson wasn't deterred. Shouldn't candidates be required to disclose any specialized training or family connections that might give them an unfair advantage? For transparency's sake, the classroom had gone silent, all eyes now shifting between Thompson and Emily, the target of his thinly veiled accusation. Blackwood studied Thompson for a long moment. Is there something specific you'd like to address, candidate Thompson? Thompson's expression turned triumphant as he reached into his pack and produced the manila folder. I think candidate Walker should explain why she failed to disclose that her father was Lieutenant Colonel Robert Walker, one of the most decorated snipers in Army history, or that her brother was Lieutenant David Walker, Navy SEAL sniper, killed in action 2 years ago in Afghanistan. The revelation landed like a thunderclap in the silent classroom. Every eye turned to Emily, who sat perfectly still, her face betraying nothing, despite the churning emotions beneath the surface. Blackwood's voice cut through the tension. Where did you get that file, Thompson? Thompson faltered slightly. That's not the point, Master Sergeant. The point is, Walker has been hiding her background. I asked you a question, candidate. Blackwood interrupted, his voice dangerously soft. That file is confidential personnel information. Accessing it without authorization is a serious offense. Thompson's confidence wavered. It was left open on Sergeant Miller's desk when I reported for additional duty yesterday. I only glanced at it. Yet you remembered specific details and brought the file to class today. Blackwood's expression hardened. Report to Captain Harrison's office immediately. The rest of you take a 10-minute break. Walker remained behind. As the other candidates filed out, Thompson looking considerably less triumphant than moments before, Emily stood at attention before Blackwood prepared for the worst. Is it true? Blackwood asked when they were alone. Yes, Master Sergeant. Why didn't you mention it? Emily met his gaze directly. I wanted to be judged on my own merits, sir, not as Robert Walker's daughter or David Walker's sister. Blackwood nodded slowly. Understandable, but it explains a great deal about your exceptional shooting skills and ballistics knowledge. My father taught both David and me from childhood, Emily acknowledged, but I've never received any formal military training beyond what's provided in this program. Blackwood studied her thoughtfully. Your father was a legend in the sniper community. I met him once during Desert Storm. He could put 3 rounds through the same hole at 800 meters using an old M24 with iron sights. A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. Said it was all in the eyes. The Walker Green, he called it. Emily felt a pang of emotion at the casual mention of her father's oft-repeated phrase. Thompson was out of line accessing your file, Blackwood continued, but the information is out now. The other candidates will view you differently. Some with newfound respect, others with increased resentment. How you handle this will determine whether you continue in the program. I understand, Master Sergeant. Blackwood's expression softened slightly. Your father would be proud of what you've accomplished so far. But he'd also tell you the hardest challenges are still ahead. Being a walker opens doors, but it also creates expectations few can live up to. Emily nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. The Walker name was both blessing and burden, a legacy of excellence that demanded nothing less than extraordinary performance. Thank you, Master Sergeant. As the other candidates began returning to the classroom, Blackwood offered one final observation. Your father once told me that being a sniper isn't about the number of targets you hit. It's about the lives you save through precision and restraint. Remember that, Walker. It's the true measure of a sniper's worth. The remainder of the day passed in a blur of sidelong glances and whispered conversations. Emily endured it with stoic detachment, focusing on the training rather than the change dynamics. Thompson had been conspicuously absent after his meeting with Captain Harrison, returning only for the afternoon physical training session with a chastened demeanor that suggested significant disciplinary action. That evening in the barracks, Chen approached Emily's bunk as she cleaned her rifle, a ritual that had become a form of meditation amid the chaos of training. So, he said quietly, the daughter of Robert Walker. That explains a few things. Emily continued her methodical cleaning. Does it change anything? Chen considered this. It means you've got bigger shoes to fill than most of us realized. Can't imagine that kind of pressure. It's not about filling shoes, Emily replied, looking up from her work. It's about honoring what they stood for. My father, my brother, they believed in something beyond themselves. That's what I'm here for. Chen nodded, understanding in his eyes. For what it's worth, Thompson got exactly what he deserved. 2 weeks of extra duty and a formal reprimand in his record. Harrison doesn't tolerate breaches of confidentiality. And Miller, Emily asked, suspecting the sergeant had left the file accessible deliberately. Nothing official, Chen admitted, but Blackwood's been watching him like a hawk since it happened. As they spoke, the barracks door opened, and Master Sergeant Blackwood entered. The room immediately fell silent as he strode to the center. Listen up, candidates. Week 3 starts tomorrow with the infiltration exercise. 72 hours in the field, full combat load, realistic opposition forces. You will operate in their 2-person teams, implementing everything you've learned so far. His pale eyes swept the room, coming to rest momentarily on Emily. This exercise separates the serious candidates from the pretenders. Typically, we lose 20% of the remaining class during this phase. He paused for effect. Team assignments will be posted at 0500. Be prepared to move out by 0530. That is all. After he departed, the barracks erupted in speculative chatter about the coming exercise and team assignments. Emily returned to cleaning her rifle, but her mind was elsewhere, contemplating the challenges ahead and the revelation that had changed her standing among her peers. The Walker name was out now, for better or worse. But names alone won no battles and saved no lives. In the days ahead, she would need to prove once and for all that she belonged in this program, not because of her lineage, but despite it, that she was a sniper in her own right, not merely the daughter of one. As she finished cleaning her weapon and prepared for sleep, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 3 weeks into what many had predicted would be a 3-day experiment, she remained standing while 9 others had fallen away. The road ahead would only grow steeper, the challenges more demanding. But Emily Walker had not come this far to falter now. Whatever the coming days might hold, she would face them as she had faced every obstacle in her life, with quiet determination and the unwavering belief that she was exactly where she was meant to be, following a path that had been prepared for her long before she knew she would walk it. The infiltration exercise began in darkness. At 0530, 16 remaining candidates stood beside 2 transport helicopters, their faces ghostly in the pre-dawn gloom. Each carried a rucksack weighing 60 pounds standard combat load, plus additional equipment for the 72-hour mission. For Emily, the pack represented more than half her body weight. Master Sergeant Blackwood stood before them, his weathered face illuminated by a handheld flashlight that cast harsh shadows across his features. This exercise simulates real-world operational conditions, he explained, voice raised over the idling helicopter engines. Each team will infiltrate designated territory, locate observation posts, identify targets, and exfiltrate without detection. Opposition forces will actively patrol the area. If you're spotted, you fail. He gestured to a large topographic map illuminated by the flashlight. Terrain is mountainous with elevations ranging from 500 to 4,000 feet. Weather forecast indicates possible temperature drops overnight. Plan accordingly. Emily studied the map intently. The exercise would take place in the mountains east of San Diego, rugged country, with limited cover in some areas, dense forest in others. Challenging terrain for anyone, but particularly daunting for someone her size carrying such a heavy load. Team assignments, Miller called out, stepping forward with a clipboard. Thompson and Ramirez, Team Alpha. Chen and Walker, Team Bravo. Emily felt a surge of relief at being paired with Chen. After the revelation of her family background, many of the candidates had become even more distant, viewing her with a mixture of resentment and suspicion. Chen at least had maintained the same respectful but professional attitude. As the teams loaded onto the helicopters, Emily caught Miller watching her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. The revelation of her connection to Robert Walker had changed the dynamic between them, not softening his criticism, but adding a new layer of scrutiny, as if he were now comparing her to an impossible standard. The helicopters lifted off as the first hints of dawn colored the eastern sky. Emily sat beside Chen, neither speaking, as the aircraft banked eastward toward the mountains. The interior vibrated with the roar of the engines, making conversation difficult without shouting. Instead, they reviewed their mission parameters silently, each lost in their own thoughts. 20 minutes later, the helicopter descended into a small clearing surrounded by pine forest. Team Bravo, Emily and Chen, were the first to deploy, fast roping to the ground with their heavy packs. As the helicopter pulled away, the sudden silence of the mountain morning enveloped them. Chen checked his GPS unit, confirming their position. 3 miles to our first observation point, he said quietly. Mostly uphill, heavy forest cover. Emily nodded, adjusting her pack straps to better distribute the punishing weight. Let's move before it gets light. They set out at a steady pace, following game trails where possible to minimize noise and avoid leaving obvious tracks. The forest was awakening around them, birds calling, insects buzzing, the occasional rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Despite the beauty of their surroundings, both remained vigilantly alert for signs of the opposition forces. By mid-morning, they had covered 2 miles, the rising sun filtering through the pine canopy in slanting shafts of golden light. The climb had been brutal, the weight of their packs turning each step into a test of endurance. Emily's shoulders burned from the constant pressure, but she maintained pace with Chen, refusing to become the limiting factor in their team. Taking a break, Chen announced quietly, removing his pack and stretching his back. Need to check the map. Emily gratefully shed her own burden, rolling her shoulders to restore circulation. As Chen studied their route, she scanned their surroundings, her eyes catching a slight movement on a ridge about 400 yards distant. Contact, she whispered, gesturing subtly. Ridge to the northeast, moving left to right. Chen carefully raised his binoculars. Opposition force. 2-man team. They haven't spotted us. They watched as the patrol moved along the ridgeline, eventually disappearing into the trees. The encounter confirmed what they had suspected: the exercise area was heavily monitored. Their path to the observation point would require even greater caution than anticipated. We should move off the trail, Emily suggested. Follow the stream bed. Harder going, but less chance of being spotted. Chen nodded agreement. Slower, but safer. Let's do it. The stream bed proved challenging terrain: slippery rocks, fallen trees, occasional patches of mud that threatened to suck the boots from their feet. But it also provided excellent concealment, the high banks and overhanging vegetation shielding them from observation. By early afternoon, they reached the vicinity of their first objective, a rocky outcropping that provided a commanding view of a valley where enemy activity would reportedly be visible. They approached with extreme caution, using natural cover to mask their movement. The final 50 yards required crawling on their stomachs, dragging their packs behind them to stay below the sight line of any observers. The observation post proved worth the effort. From their concealed position among the rocks, they had a clear view of a mock enemy encampment in the valley below, tense vehicles and personnel moving about in patterns that suggested a supply depot or a command center. Perfect position, Chen whispered as they set up their observation equipment. Clear sight lines, good fields of fire, multiple escape routes. Emily established their hide, creating a concealed position using local vegetation and the camouflage netting they'd carried. The techniques her father had taught her, lessons from his own operations in mountainous terrain, now served her well. When completed, their position was virtually invisible from more than 10 feet away. Now we wait, she said, settling behind the spotting scope to begin their surveillance. For the next 4 hours, they meticulously documented the activity below, counting personnel, identifying routines, noting defensive positions. Chen sketched a detailed map, while Emily kept watch, her keen eyes picking out details that others might miss. Guard rotation every 2 hours, she noted, but the northeast quadrant has a 3-minute gap in coverage during changeover. Textbook vulnerability, Chen agreed. Command would want to know about that. As evening approached, the temperature began to drop noticeably. Their position, while tactically sound, was exposed to the elements, with the wind growing stronger as darkness fell. Emily checked the thermometer attached to her pack, 55 degrees and falling. By midnight, they could expect temperatures in the low 40s. We should take shifts, Chen suggested. 4 hours on, 4 off. I'll take first watch. Emily nodded, grateful for the chance to rest. The day's exertion had taken its toll, and despite her determination, her smaller body had limits. She arranged her sleeping bag in the most sheltered part of their hide and crawled inside, leaving her boots on as protocol dictated. Wake me if anything changes, she instructed before closing her eyes. Sleep came quickly, her exhausted body surrendering to unconsciousness despite the discomfort of the hard ground and the persistent chill of the mountain night. Emily's watch shift began at midnight. The valley below was mostly dark now, with only a few lights marking the enemy encampment. The moon provided enough illumination to maintain surveillance through the night vision scope, the green-tinted world revealing continuing activity despite the late hour. The temperature had dropped to 38 degrees, significantly colder than forecast. Emily pulled her jacket tighter, suppressing a shiver. Cold was the enemy of precision shooting, causing muscles to tighten and fine motor control to deteriorate. She flexed her fingers regularly to maintain circulation. At approximately 200 hours, she noticed a change in the pattern below. A vehicle arrived at the encampment, a high-mobility tactical vehicle with distinctive markings. Chen, she whispered gently, waking her partner. New development. Chen was instantly alert, years of training overcoming the grogginess of interrupted sleep. He joined her at the observation position, studying the scene through binoculars. VIP arrival, he assessed. Based on the reception, could be our primary intelligence target. The mission parameters had mentioned a possible high-value target, an enemy commander, whose identification would earn significant points in the exercise. They watched as a figure emerged from the vehicle, surrounded by security personnel who escorted him to the largest structure in the compound. Can't make out the face from this angle, Emily said, frustration evident in her voice. Identification was a critical component of their mission. We need a better position, Chen suggested. That outcropping to the west would give us a clear view of the command building entrance. The outcropping, he indicated, was about 300 yards away, an exposed move that would require perfect execution to avoid detection. The risk was substantial, but so was the potential reward. I'll go, Emily decided. I'm smaller, less visible. You maintain position here in case the target emerges again. Chen looked uncertain. That's a dangerous move in the dark. The terrain between here and there is tricky. I can handle it. Radio check every 15 minutes. If I miss one, assume I've been compromised and complete the mission without me. Before Chen could object further, Emily began preparing for the move, stripping her equipment down to the essentials: night vision goggles, radio sidearm, and camera with telephoto lens. The lighter load would allow faster, quieter movement. Be careful, Chen said simply as she prepared to depart. Emily nodded once, then slipped out of their hide like a shadow, using the darkness and natural contours of the land to conceal her movement. The journey to the western outcropping would require crossing an area of broken ground with minimal cover, a challenging traverse under any circumstances, but particularly daunting in darkness, with enemy forces potentially watching. She moved with deliberate precision, placing each foot with care to avoid dislodging rocks or breaking twigs that might reveal her position. The night vision goggles provided visibility, but reduced depth perception, forcing her to proceed more slowly than she would have preferred. 20 minutes into the journey, she was only halfway to her objective. The radio on her hip vibrated silently, Chen's first scheduled check-in. She pressed the transmit button twice in rapid succession, the agreed-upon signal for proceeding as planned. No words were exchanged that might be intercepted by opposition forces. As she continued her cautious advance, the sound of voices froze her in place. 2 opposition force members were approaching along a path that would intersect with her route. There was no time to retreat and the sparse vegetation offered minimal concealment. Emily made an instant decision, dropping flat against the ground and pulling a small camouflage tarp over her body. The technique known as becoming a rock was one her father had taught her years ago. Success depended not on hiding completely, but on breaking up the human silhouette enough to avoid triggering the brain's pattern recognition. The voices grew louder as the patrol approached. Through the slight gap in her covering, Emily could see their boots less than 10 feet away. Her breathing slowed to an almost imperceptible rhythm, her body completely still, despite the pebbles digging into her ribs and the cold seeping through her clothing. The patrol paused, one of them sweeping the area with a flashlight that passed directly over her position. Emily fought the instinctive urge to close her eyes against the light, knowing that the reflection might give her away. Instead, she kept them open, but unfocused, another technique her father had drilled into her. For a heart-stopping moment, the flashlight beams settled near her position. Then, apparently satisfied, the patrol continued on their route, their voices gradually fading into the night. Emily remained motionless for another full minute, ensuring they were truly gone before cautiously resuming her journey. By the time she reached the western outcropping, her uniform was damp with sweat despite the cold. The exertion of moving silently over difficult terrain had been enormous, but the position proved worth the effort. From here, she had a clear line of sight to the entrance of the command building, now illuminated by security lighting. She set up the camera with telephoto lens, adjusting the night vision adapter to capture usable images in the low light. The second radio check came and went, her double-click response informing Chen that she had reached her position safely. For nearly an hour, Emily maintained her vigil, photographing everyone who entered or exited the building, though the primary target remained inside. Her exposed position was growing increasingly uncomfortable as the temperature continued to drop, but she remained focused on the mission, ignoring the discomfort. At 0410 hours, activity at the command building suddenly increased. Security personnel took up new positions, forming a protective corridor from the door to the waiting vehicle. Emily raised her camera finger poised over the shutter release. The door opened and the target emerged surrounded by aides. As he passed under the security lights, Emily captured a series of photographs, the telephoto lens revealing clear details of his face. She recognized the enemy commander immediately, Captain Harrison in disguise, playing the role of the high-value intelligence target. Mission objective complete. She transmitted 3 clicks to Chen, their signal for success, and prepared to withdraw. The return journey would be even more challenging as the eastern sky was beginning to lighten with the approach of dawn. She would need to reach their original hide before full daylight exposed her movement. As she gathered her equipment, a flash of movement in her peripheral vision caused her to freeze. Another patrol, this one approaching directly toward her position from the south. There was no time to retreat and nowhere to hide effectively on the exposed outcropping. Discovery seemed inevitable. Emily made a split-second tactical decision. Rather than attempting to hide, she deliberately created a small noise, just enough to draw attention, then rolled into a depression several yards from her actual position. When the patrol investigated the sound, they would focus on that area, potentially missing her true location. The gambit worked partially. The patrol diverted toward the noise, allowing Emily to slip away in the opposite direction. But in her haste to clear the area, a misstep on loose rock created a distinct clatter that immediately alerted her pursuers. "Contact," one of them called out, moving north from the outcropping. The chase was on. Emily abandoned stealth for speed, using the pre-dawn gloom and her knowledge of the terrain to maintain distance from her pursuers. The radio at her hip vibrated, Chen no doubt having heard the commotion and checking on her status. There was no time to respond. She navigated by instinct and memory, retracing her earlier path while adding deliberate misdirections. Twice she doubled back, crossing a stream to break her trail and laying false tracks in the opposite direction. The opposition force was persistent, but Emily's smaller size now became an advantage, allowing her to slip through gaps in the vegetation that her larger pursuers had to circumvent. After 20 minutes of evasion, she could no longer hear the sounds of pursuit. Dawn was breaking the growing light, both blessing and curse, allowing better visibility of the terrain, but also making her more visible to any observers. She needed to reach the hide before full daylight exposed her completely. Chen's voice suddenly came through her earpiece, breaking protocol with an urgent whisper. "Walker, if you can hear me, be advised, second patrol, approaching the hide from the east. I'm compromised. Mission abort. Proceed to extraction point Alpha." The development changed everything. Their primary hide was no longer secure, and Chen was apparently under direct threat. Extraction Point Alpha was nearly 5 miles away, a grueling journey through increasingly exposed terrain as the day brightened. And without Chen, she would need to carry all their critical equipment herself. Emily took a moment to assess her options, then made her decision. She would not abandon her partner. Protocol dictated mission completion over all other considerations, but the first rule her father had taught her was more fundamental: you never leave your team behind. She altered course, circling wide to approach their hide from the west, the opposite direction from the reported patrol. The additional distance would cost valuable time, but it offered the best chance of reaching Chen undetected. As she moved, she formulated a plan that violated several principles of the exercise, but aligned with her more important priority. The sun had fully risen by the time she reached the vicinity of their hide, bathing the landscape in golden morning light that eliminated most shadows. Emily proceeded with extreme caution, using her compact binoculars to scout ahead. From her vantage point, she could see the opposition force, 3 men in tactical gear, surrounding the hide position. Chen sat with his hands behind his head, his expression stoic, but clearly disappointed at being captured. Standard protocol in the exercise dictated that captured candidates were effectively eliminated, their mission failed. But the exercise also evaluated problem-solving and adaptability. Emily saw an opportunity to demonstrate both. She set down her pack and extracted a small signaling mirror from her survival kit. Finding position where she could catch the morning sunlight, she flashed a brief pattern toward Chen, an old code their instructors wouldn't recognize, but that Chen would understand from their previous training together. Chen gave no obvious reaction, but she saw him shift position slightly, angling his body toward the extraction point and away from where she was actually located, a subtle misdirection to keep the opposition force's attention focused elsewhere. Emily moved closer, using the terrain for concealment, until she was within 50 yards of the opposition force. Close enough for her plan, but dangerously exposed if spotted. From her position, she could hear their conversation. "Command says to bring him in," one was saying. "His partner is still out there somewhere." "She won't get far," another replied confidently. "Not with checkpoints on all the major routes. Besides, protocol says she should abandon him and complete the mission." "Unless she does something stupid," the third added with a laugh. Emily almost smiled at the irony. What she was about to do definitely qualified as stupid by conventional tactical assessment. But sometimes the unexpected move was the most effective. She took 3 small stones from her pocket and threw them in rapid succession into the brush about 30 yards from her actual position. The noise immediately drew the attention of the opposition force, 2 of them moving to investigate, while the third remained with Chen. As they moved away, Emily extracted her sidearm loaded with the non-lethal training rounds used in the exercise. Timing her movement precisely, she emerged from cover, closed the distance to the remaining guard, and pressed the weapon to his back. "Exercise round," she said quietly. "You're down. Don't move." The guard stiffened, then nodded in reluctant acknowledgement of the simulation kill. In a real operation, he would be dead, and protocol required him to play along. "Chen, move out," Emily ordered crisply. "Extraction Point Alpha." Chen didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed his rifle and the most critical pieces of their equipment, leaving the bulkier items behind to increase their speed. By the time the other 2 guards realized what had happened and returned, Emily and Chen were already moving rapidly through the forest, using terrain features to break line of sight. "That was either brilliant or suicidal," Chen commented as they put distance between themselves and their pursuers. "Probably both." "Mission parameters specified team completion," Emily replied. "You had the intelligence photos in your pack. Leaving you behind wasn't an option." Chen gave her a searching look. Most candidates would have followed protocol and headed for extraction. Solo completion still gets a passing grade. Emily's expression hardened slightly. "I'm not most candidates." They continued moving at a grueling pace, knowing that their escape had likely been reported, and additional opposition forces would be mobilized to intercept them. The extraction point, a meadow large enough for helicopter landing, was still more than 4 miles away, and they needed to reach it by the designated time or be considered mission failures. The day grew warmer as morning progressed, the physical exertion causing both to sweat despite the cool mountain air. They paused only briefly for water and orientation, maintaining as rapid a pace as the terrain and their loads would allow. 2 miles from their destination, they encountered their first checkpoint, two opposition force members monitoring a natural choke point where the trail passed between large rock formations. There was no obvious way around without adding significant distance to their journey, and time was becoming critical. Ideas, Chen whispered as they observed the checkpoint from concealment. Emily studied the terrain, noting the patterns of the guards' movement and the layout of their position. We need a diversion, something to draw them both away from the trail long enough for us to slip past. Fire, Chen suggested, pointing to the dry brush that surrounded the area. Emily shook her head. Too dangerous with these conditions, even for a small one. And they'd know it was intentional. She continued scanning the area, then noticed a game trail leading up to a precarious pile of rocks above the checkpoint. There, if those rocks were to fall, they'd have to investigate. The plan was simple but risky. Chen would remain in position to observe the guards while Emily circled around to the higher position. When both guards were drawn away by the rockfall, Chen would move through the checkpoint. Emily would then descend and follow. Executing the plan required Emily to climb a steep, unstable slope without being detected, a challenge that tested her already exhausted body. Her smaller size helped her navigate the narrow game trail, but the loose rocks and crumbling soil made each step treacherous. Twice she nearly fell, catching herself only by grabbing exposed tree roots. When she reached the rock pile, she paused to catch her breath and signal Chen that she was in position. The guards below remained unaware of her presence, continuing their casual patrol of the trail. Emily studied the rock formation, identifying a key stone that, if dislodged, would trigger a small avalanche down the slope away from the trail, but significant enough to demand investigation. Using a branch as a lever, she carefully applied pressure to the stone. For a moment, nothing happened. She increased the force, her muscles straining with the effort. Suddenly, the stone shifted, then tumbled free, triggering exactly the cascade she had hoped for. Rocks clattered down the hillside in a cloud of dust, the noise echoing through the canyon. As expected, both guards immediately moved toward the disturbance, weapons ready. Emily pressed herself flat against the ground, becoming invisible among the brush as they scanned the hillside. Below, she caught a glimpse of Chen slipping silently past the checkpoint, precisely as planned. Now came the difficult part. Emily needed to descend and follow Chen before the guards returned to their position. The direct route down was too exposed, forcing her to circle around to the backside of the hill, a longer journey that consumed precious minutes. By the time she reached the trail beyond the checkpoint, Chen was waiting with growing concern. "You're late," he whispered. "We need to move. They'll figure out it was a diversion any minute." They set off at a near run, putting as much distance between themselves and the checkpoint and as possible before the alarm could be raised. The trail began to descend the terrain, opening up as they approached the meadow that served as their extraction point. But as they emerged from the tree line with the meadow in sight, they found their final challenge. A substantial opposition force had anticipated their route and established a perimeter around the extraction zone. At least 6 guards were visible, with likely more in concealed positions. The designated extraction time was less than 20 minutes away. There was no chance of finding an alternate route in time, and a direct approach would certainly result in their capture. "This is impossible," Chen muttered, surveying the situation through his binoculars. "They've got every approach covered." Emily studied the deployment pattern, her tactician's mind working through possibilities. "Not quite," she said after a moment. "Look at their positioning. They're expecting us to approach from the forest using cover." "But what if we didn't?" Chen followed her gaze to the open meadow. "You want to cross open ground with no cover? That's suicide." "It's exactly why they won't expect it," Emily countered. "They've positioned their strongest observation points toward the tree line. The sun is at our backs if we approach from here. If we use that drainage ditch and time it right, we might make it." The drainage ditch she indicated cut across one corner of the meadow, a shallow depression that might provide minimal concealment for someone small enough to take advantage of it. Someone like Emily. "I can make it through," she continued. "Create a diversion from inside their perimeter. When they respond, you can cross at the weakest point." Chen looked skeptical. "That's an enormous risk, and against the scenario parameters we're supposed to extract together." "Parameters also specify mission completion by any necessary means," Emily reminded him. "Sometimes the only way forward is the unexpected route." After a moment's consideration, Chen nodded reluctantly. I don't like it, but I don't see a better option. Be careful. Emily shed her pack, taking only essential sidearm radio and the precious intelligence photos that were their primary mission objective. The lighter load would allow faster movement in a lower profile in the shallow ditch. Give me 5 minutes to get in position, she instructed. When you hear the diversion count to 20, then move across at that point. She indicated the section of perimeter that would likely be weakest once the guards responded to her distraction. Chen checked his watch. Extraction in 17 minutes. Don't cut it too close. With a nod of acknowledgement, Emily departed, circling wide to approach the drainage ditch from the least observed angle. The ditch itself was barely 18 inches deep, insufficient cover for most people, but just enough for someone of Emily's stature to remain below the sight line if she stayed flat. She entered the ditch at its outermost point, immediately pressing her body into the shallow depression. The advance was grueling, inching forward on elbows and knees, keeping her head below the edge of the ditch, fighting the instinct to rush as the extraction time approached. Twice she spotted opposition force members patrolling nearby, freezing in place until they passed. The sun beat down on her back, the physical strain causing sweat to sting her eyes. But she continued her methodical advance, closing the distance to the perimeter yard by painful yard. When she reached a position approximately 50 yards inside their security line, she prepared for the final phase of her plan. The diversion needed to be substantial enough to draw attention, but not so obvious that it would immediately be identified as a tactical ploy. Emily opted for a classic misdirection, creating the impression of movement in multiple locations to suggest more than one infiltrator. She prepared 3 small noisemakers from items in her pocket and pebbles, wrapped in tissue that when thrown would create distinct sounds in different locations. Timing would be critical. With extraction now less than 7 minutes away, Emily executed her plan. She threw the first noisemaker toward the far side of the perimeter, immediately followed by the second toward the rear. As guards responded to these disturbances, she used her sidearm to fire a single training round into the dirt near a third location, creating a dust puff that simulated a hasty shot. The effect was immediate. The opposition force, believing they were being probed at multiple points by multiple infiltrators, dispersed to investigate. As predicted, the section Emily had identified as their egress point was left with minimal coverage as resources were diverted elsewhere. Through her binoculars, she spotted Chen making his move, sprinting across the open ground at the weakest point of the perimeter. A guard turned, spotting the movement, but too late to intercept. Chen crossed the final yards to the extraction point just as the distinctive sound of an approaching helicopter became audible in the distance. Now Emily faced her own final challenge, covering 50 yards of open ground to reach the extraction point before the helicopter landed. The diversion had worked too well. She was effectively surrounded by the opposition force, all now on high alert. With no better option, she chose pure audacity. Rising from her concealment, she sprinted directly toward the extraction point, counting on surprise, and her head started to carry her through. Shouts of alarm went up immediately, the opposition force converging on her position from multiple directions. The helicopter appeared over the tree line, beginning its descent toward the meadow. Emily pushed her tired legs to their limit, focusing solely on the landing zone, now just 30 yards ahead. Behind her, the opposition force closed the gap, the lead pursuer now just seconds from intercepting her. Chen saw her predicament from the extraction point. Breaking cover, he ran to meet her, laying down suppressing fire with his training weapon to slow her pursuers. The distraction bought Emily the seconds she needed to cross the final distance to the safety zone, just as the helicopter touched down. Both candidates tumbled into the aircraft, the door gunner covering their extraction with his own weapon. As the helicopter lifted off, Emily caught a glimpse of the opposition force standing in the meadow below, several offering grudging salutes to acknowledge the unexpected success of their audacious escape. "Mission complete," Chen shouted over the roar of the engines, holding up the package containing their intelligence photos. "Target identified, evidence secured, team extracted intact." Emily leaned back against the helicopter's vibrating wall, too exhausted to respond verbally. Instead, she managed a tired smile and a thumbs up. Against all odds and expectations, they had succeeded. Neither knew as they returned to base that their performance would become a topic of intense debate among the instructor cadre, not for their failure to follow conventional tactics, but for their success in adapting to changing circumstances and completing the mission through unconventional means. a debate that would ultimately determine Emily Walker's future in the sniper program. Unprecedented, Captain Harrison declared, studying the after-action report spread across his desk. Candidate Walker not only identified the high-value target with photographic confirmation, but executed a tactical rescue of her compromised teammate and achieved extraction against overwhelming opposition. The instructor cadre had gathered in Harrison's office to evaluate the performance of the remaining candidates in the infiltration exercise. Of the 16 who had begun, only 12 had successfully completed the mission parameters. Master Sergeant Blackwood nodded in agreement. Her approach was unorthodox but effective. When conventional routes were blocked, she innovated. That's exactly what we want in operational scenarios. Sergeant Miller, however, remained unconvinced. She violated multiple protocols, sir, endangered the mission by prioritizing her teammate over the objective. In a real-world situation, that kind of sentimentality gets people killed. Did it? Harrison challenged, gesturing to the report. The mission was completed successfully. Both team members extracted, intelligence secured. By any objective measure, Walker's team achieved the highest performance rating in the exercise. With respect, sir, Miller persisted, the physical demands of the full program remain my concern. Walker consistently finishes at or near the bottom in endurance exercises. The mountains of Afghanistan won't be as forgiving as our training scenarios. Blackwood's weathered features hardened slightly. And yet, when it counted, Walker covered more ground under more difficult conditions than any other candidate. 5 miles over mountainous terrain, evading multiple opposition teams after spending a night in sub-40 temperatures with minimal equipment. That's not the point, Miller began. That's exactly the point, Blackwood interrupted. We're not training candidates for parade ground excellence, Sergeant. We're training them for battlefield effectiveness. Walker has consistently demonstrated that she can compensate for physical limitations with superior tactical thinking and marksmanship. Harrison studied both men thoughtfully. The debate reflected the larger question that had surrounded Emily Walker's candidacy from the beginning, whether her exceptional skills could overcome the physical realities of her smaller stature in one of the military's most demanding specialties. The program has 3 weeks remaining, Harrison said finally. Walker has earned the right to continue based on her performance thus far. The final evaluation will settle the matter definitively. Miller accepted the decision with a curt nod, though his expression suggested continued reservations. After the instructors departed, Harrison remained alone in his office, reviewing Walker's complete file with renewed interest. The daughter of Robert Walker was proving to be as formidable as her lineage suggested, but in ways distinctly her own. Where her father had been renowned for raw physical power combined with shooting precision, Emily compensated for her smaller stature with tactical innovation and adaptation. Harrison made a note in the file: candidate demonstrates exceptional problem-solving under pressure. Consider special operational deployment if program completed successfully. Then he closed the folder, his decision made. Emily Walker would have her chance to prove herself in the final phase, the most grueling test the program offered. What happened there would determine not just her future, but potentially the future of the program itself. When Emily and Chen returned to the barracks after the exercise debrief, they found the atmosphere noticeably changed. The other candidates, previously dismissive or openly hostile toward Emily, now regarded her with a complex mixture of respect, curiosity, and in some cases, lingering resentment. Thompson approached as she stowed her equipment, his expression uncharacteristically restrained. "Word is you pulled off something crazy out there, Walker," he said, the usual mockery absent from his tone. "Chen says you took out a guard and extracted him from a compromised position." Emily continued organizing her gear. "We completed the mission parameters. Nothing more." "That's not how they're telling it," Thompson persisted. "They're saying you did things no one expected a candidate to accomplish, especially someone my size," Emily finished, looking up at him directly. Thompson had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. "I was going to say someone with your level of experience. But yeah, that too." For a moment, Emily considered dismissing the conversation with a curt response. Instead, she chose a different approach. "My father used to say that a sniper's greatest weapon isn't their rifle, Thompson. It's adaptability, the willingness to find solutions where others see only obstacles." She closed her locker. "Maybe that's easier to learn when you've spent your whole life adapting to a world built for people bigger than you." Thompson absorbed this, his expression thoughtful. Your old man sounds smart. Emily acknowledged the past tense hanging between them like a weight. An awkward silence followed before Thompson spoke again. Listen, Walker, about the personnel file thing. That's in the past, Emily interrupted. We've all got more important things to focus on now. Thompson nodded, seemingly relieved to avoid a direct apology. Final phase starts next week. Mountain operations in the Sierra Nevadas. They say it's the hardest part of the program. So I've heard. Well, Thompson said, turning to leave. Good luck out there. Sounds like you might actually need less of it than the rest of us. As he walked away, Chen appeared at Emily's side, having witnessed the exchange with evident surprise. Thompson almost sounded like a human being, he observed quietly. Miracles do happen. Emily allowed a small smile. People can surprise you. Speaking of surprises, Chen continued, Blackwood wants to see you, says it's important. Emily found Master Sergeant Blackwood in the small office he used for administrative work, a space as austere and functional as the man himself. He was reviewing documents when she arrived, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. Reporting as ordered, Master Sergeant, Emily said, standing at attention. Blackwood gestured to the chair across from his desk. At ease, Walker. Sit. As Emily complied, she noticed a familiar folder on his desk, her personnel file, the same one Thompson had illicitly accessed weeks earlier. You've created quite a stir, Blackwood began, closing the folder. Your performance in the infiltration exercise has some of the instructors reevaluating their assumptions about what makes an effective sniper. Thank you, Master Sergeant. Don't thank me yet, Blackwood cautioned. You've also raised concerns. Sergeant Miller believes your approach demonstrated a dangerous prioritization of teammate welfare over mission objectives. Emily kept her expression neutral, though internally she bristled at the criticism. The mission was completed successfully, with all objectives achieved. Yes, it was, Blackwood acknowledged. And in my assessment, your decision to extract candidate Chen, rather than proceeding Olo, showed exactly the kind of judgment we want in our operators. A sniper who abandons their spotter has failed regardless of whether they hit their target. He leaned forward slightly, his pale eyes intent. But that's not why I called you here. I received a communication you should be aware of. Your mother contacted the program office requesting an emergency conversation with you. Emily stiffened, immediately concerned. Is something wrong? The message didn't specify, Blackwood said, only that it was urgent and concerned information about your brother. David, Emily's heart quickened. Her brother had been declared killed in action 2 years earlier. His body never recovered from the remote valley where his team had been ambushed. What new information could possibly have emerged now? There's a secure phone in the next room, Blackwood continued, rising from his desk. Take as long as you need. I'll ensure you're not disturbed. Emily moved to the adjoining office in a daze, her mind racing with possibilities. The secure phone sat on a simple desk, the red handset a stark contrast to the otherwise unremarkable room. She lifted it, dialing the number Blackwood had provided. Her mother answered on the second ring, her voice composed, but with an underlying tension that Emily recognized immediately. Emily, thank God, I've been trying to reach you for days. Mom, what's going on? Master Sergeant Blackwood said it was about David. There was a pause filled only with the slight static of the secure line. When her mother spoke again, her words changed everything. They found something, Emmy, in Afghanistan. David's dog tags. And a journal. The recovery team says it was hidden in a village near where he was lost. Emily gripped the phone tighter. What did it say? Most of it was operational details, things they can't share with us. But there was a personal message for you. The liaison officer said, David wrote that he was tracking a specific enemy sniper. Someone they called Crescent Moon because of a curved scar on his face. David believed this man was responsible for multiple American casualties. The name meant nothing to Emily, but the implications were clear. Her brother had been hunting a specific target when he was killed, a sniper like himself. Emily, her mother continued, her voice dropping lower. The liaison mentioned something else. They believe this same sniper might still be active in the region. The recovery team found recent evidence suggesting he's operating in the same area where David was lost. The revelation hit Emily like a physical blow. The man who had killed her brother was not only still alive, but continuing to target American forces. The abstract mission of becoming a sniper suddenly crystallized into something far more personal, a specific purpose that had eluded her until now. "There's something else you should know," her mother said, after a moment of silence. "I spoke with Colonel Mackenzie from Dad's old unit. He mentioned that a special operations team is being assembled for deployment to that region, a counter-sniper unit." Emily closed her eyes, understanding immediately where this was heading. When, within the month, he thought, "Emmy, I know what you're thinking, but please, I have to finish the program first." Emily interrupted, her decision already made. "3 more weeks, then I'll put in for assignment to that unit." Her mother's sigh carried years of worry for a husband and son already lost to war, and now a daughter determined to follow the same dangerous path. "Just promise me you'll be careful," she said finally. "I can't lose you too." "I'll be careful," Emily promised, "but I have to do this, Mom. For David. For Dad." "I know," her mother replied quietly. "They'd be so proud of you, Emmy. As am I." The conversation concluded with the practical details: the liaison officer's contact information, the timeline for the team deployment, the official channels Emily would need to navigate to request assignment. Throughout, Emily maintained her composure, focusing on information rather than emotion. But when she finally hung up the phone, she remained seated, staring at the wall as the full weight of the revelation settled upon her. Her brother had died hunting a killer of American soldiers, a sniper who remained at large, claiming more victims. Now Emily had the chance to complete his mission, to bring closure not just for her family but for all those affected by this unseen enemy. The final phase of the sniper program had suddenly taken on new significance. No longer was it merely the culmination of her training journey, it was the gateway to a mission of profound personal importance, one for which she had been preparing unknowingly since childhood. When she finally emerged from the office, Blackwood was waiting, his expression revealing that he had already intuited the nature of the communication. "You've received significant news," he observed. "Not a question." Emily nodded. "Information about my brother, and a potential deployment opportunity after completion of the program." Blackwood studied her carefully. "The counter-sniper unit being formed for Helmand Province." Emily's surprise must have shown on her face because Blackwood continued, "I still have contacts in operational planning. They've been asking about exceptional candidates from this class for immediate deployment." "Then you know why I need to complete this program successfully," Emily said. "I do," Blackwood acknowledged, "but I need to be certain your motivation is tactically sound. Vengeance is a powerful driver, Walker, but it makes for poor operational decisions." Emily met his gaze directly. "This isn't about vengeance, Master Sergeant. It's about completing an unfinished mission, protecting other soldiers from a threat my brother identified but couldn't eliminate." Blackwood considered this, apparently finding her answer satisfactory. "The final phase begins Monday. 7 days in the High Sierra. Full mission profile, extreme weather conditions, minimal support. It will test every skill you've developed and reveal any weaknesses you have managed to conceal." "I'll be ready." "See that you are," Blackwood said, his tone softening slightly. "Your father once told me that the most dangerous moment for a sniper isn't when they're taking the shot, it's in the preparation that precedes it. One overlooked detail, one moment of inattention in the finest marksmanship in the world won't save you." Emily nodded, recognizing another of her father's frequent lessons. "He told me the same thing." "Then honor his teaching," Blackwood advised. "Prepare as if your life depends on it, because soon enough it will." As Emily departed, the weight of new purpose settled on her shoulders, a burden, yes, but also a clarity of mission that had previously been absent. The path ahead was suddenly illuminated, each step leading toward a specific objective that transcended the program itself. In the barracks that night, as the other candidates discussed the coming final phase with a mixture of anticipation and apprehension, Emily sat alone on her bunk, methodically cleaning her rifle. The familiar ritual had always brought her comfort, a meditative process that connected her to both her father and brother. Now it served another purpose: preparation for what lay ahead. Not just the program's final challenge, but the real mission that waited beyond. Somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan, a killer continued to operate, unaware that the sister of one of his victims was preparing to hunt him as he had hunted others. Emily checked each component of her weapon with meticulous care, her father's words echoing in her mind. A sniper's true weapon is patience. She had been patient for 2 years since David's death. She could be patient a little longer. 3 more weeks to complete the program. Then the real mission would begin. The Sierra Nevada mountains loomed like ancient sentinels against the dawn sky, their snow-capped peaks tinged rose gold by the rising sun. The transport helicopter carrying the final 12 candidates thundered through a mountain pass, rotors churning the frigid air as it navigated toward the remote training grounds, where the culminating phase of the Scout Sniper program would unfold. Emily Walker sat near the open door, the biting cold seeping through her cold weather gear despite its technical design. The temperature at altitude hovered near 20 degrees Fahrenheit, with forecasts predicting a severe weather system moving in within 48 hours. The conditions were deliberately challenging a simulation of the harsh environments snipers often operated within. Master Sergeant Blackwood stood at the center of the aircraft holding onto an overhead strap for balance as he delivered final instructions. The mountain phase evaluates your ability to operate in extreme conditions with minimal support, he shouted over the engine noise. Each two-person team will be dropped at separate insertion points. You'll navigate to your assign and hide positions, establish observation, identify designated targets, and execute simulated elimination. Final extraction will occur 72 hours from insertion, weather permitting. His gaze swept across the candidates, lingering momentarily on Emily. This is not a competition against each other. It's a test of your ability to execute the mission regardless of environmental challenges. Some of you will fail. Nature is a harsher judge than any instructor. The helicopter banked sharply, beginning its descent toward the first drop zone. Through the open door, Emily could see the terrain below, a forbidding landscape of rocky slopes, dense pine forest, and snow-filled ravines. Beautiful but unforgiving. Team assignments, Miller announced, consulting his clipboard. Thompson and Ramirez drop zone Alpha, Chen and Walker drop zone Bravo. Emily exchanged glances with Chen, both recognizing the significance of their pairing. After their successful performance in the infiltration exercise, the instructors had maintained their partnership unusual in a program that typically rotated teams to evaluate adaptability. It suggested the instructors wanted to see if their previous success could be replicated under even more demanding conditions. Or perhaps, Emily thought darkly, they expected one of them to fail and wanted to observe how the other would respond. The helicopter touched down briefly at Drop Zone Alpha. Thompson and Ramirez disembarking with their heavy packs before the aircraft lifted off again. 20 minutes later, it settled in a small clearing surrounded by towering pines. Drop Zone Bravo. Walker, Chen, move out, Miller ordered, barely waiting for the skids to touch ground. They exited the aircraft at a crouch, the rotor wash whipping snow into blinding clouds around them. The moment their boots hit the frozen ground, the helicopter lifted off, banking away and disappearing over a ridgeline, leaving them in sudden, profound silence, broken only by the whisper of wind through the pines. Chen consulted the GPS unit, confirming their position. 7 miles to our assigned hide, mostly uphill. Emily surveyed their surroundings, mentally calculating the challenges ahead. Their designated hide was on the western slope of a mountain locally known as Widowmaker, due to its treacherous conditions and unpredictable weather patterns. The location offered excellent fields of fire across a valley where target scenarios would be staged, but reaching it would test their endurance and mountaineering skills. Weather's deteriorating faster than forecast, she observed, noting the thickening clouds gathering around the higher peaks. We should move. They set off through the forest, each carrying packs weighing nearly 70 pounds, an especially punishing load for Emily's smaller frame. The specialized equipment included not just their weapons and ammunition, but cold weather survival gear, rations for 3 days, observation equipment, and communication systems. The terrain proved immediately challenging. What appeared on maps as gentle slopes were in reality steep inclines covered with loose scree and patches of ice. Each step required careful placement to avoid injury or excessive noise. Despite the bitter cold, both were soon sweating from exertion, the moisture a dangerous liability in the frigid conditions. Pace ourselves, Chen advised as they paused briefly at the 2-mile mark. Still a long way to go. Emily nodded, controlling her breathing to avoid visible vapor clouds that might reveal their position. Though no opposition forces had been mentioned for this exercise, experience had taught them to assume constant observation and potential threats. They continued their ascent using established pathfinding techniques to minimize energy expenditure while maintaining tactical awareness. As they gained elevation, the forest thinned, exposing them to harsher winds and decreasing temperatures. By mid-afternoon, they had covered 5 miles with the most challenging terrain still ahead. Weather's turning, Chen observed, gesturing toward the darkening sky. Snow had begun to fall, light flurries that would likely intensify as the forecasted storm system moved in. We need to reach the hide before dark, Emily said, checking her watch. Less than 2 hours of daylight left. The final approach to their designated position required traversing an exposed ridgeline before descending slightly to a natural depression that would serve as their hide. The ridgeline offered no cover from the increasingly strong winds that buffeted them from the west, driving snow and ice crystals against any exposed skin with painful intensity. Emily led the way, her smaller size actually advantageous in maintaining a lower profile against the skyline. The wind threatened to topple her several times, forcing her to crouch lower, almost crawling across sections where gusts reached near gale force. They reached the designated hide location just as darkness was falling, the temperature plummeting with the setting sun. The natural depression, a shallow bowl formed by wind erosion and bordered by stunted pines, offered some protection from the elements, but establishing a proper hide would require significant work. Priority is shelter, Chen stated, dropping his pack and immediately beginning to unload equipment. Temperature will hit single digits overnight. Emily nodded, already assessing the environment for materials. Her father's lessons in cold weather survival guided her actions, creating a low-profile shelter that would provide thermal protection while maintaining tactical concealment. Using the stunted pines as a framework, they constructed a shallow snow cave, reinforced with branches, its entrance positioned away from the wind and toward their observation sector. Working methodically despite numbing fingers, they established their positions, setting up the observation equipment, arranging their weapon systems, creating a covered space where one could rest while the other maintained watch. The snow continued to fall, increasing in intensity as night fully descended, but now it worked to their advantage, further concealing their position. First watch, Chen asked as they completed the setup, both shivering despite their exertions. I'll take it, Emily replied. You get some rest. As Chen settled into their crude shelter, Emily positioned herself at the observation post, her rifle beside her, the spotting scope trained on the valley below where targets would eventually appear. The snow limited visibility, but the sophisticated night vision equipment allowed her to maintain surveillance despite the conditions. The valley lay quiet, moonlight occasionally breaking through gaps in the clouds to illuminate the snow-covered landscape with an ethereal glow. In these brief moments of clarity, Emily could see the full scope of their position, the tactical advantages and vulnerabilities. Their hide offered excellent firing angles, but limited escape routes if evacuation became necessary. The night deepened, temperatures dropping as predicted. Emily maintained her watch-rotating positions periodically to prevent muscles from stiffening in the cold. Her thoughts turned to the revelation about her brother's mission, the enemy sniper he had been tracking when he was killed. Somewhere in Afghanistan, that man still operated, still took American lives. She wondered if conditions there resembled what she faced now, the bitter cold, the isolation, the constant vigilance required to survive. Had her brother endured similar challenges in his final days? Had he perhaps lain in a hide not unlike this one, watching for the enemy, who would ultimately claim his life instead? The questions had no answers, but they sharpened her resolve. This final test was not merely an evaluation for program completion. It was preparation for the real mission that awaited if she succeeded. Every discomfort endured now was training for the actual hardships to come. 4 hours later, she woke Chen for his watch, then crawled into the shelter he vacated. Despite exhaustion, sleep came fitfully, her body fighting the cold that seemed to seep through every layer of protection. When she finally drifted off, her dreams were fragmented images of mountain landscapes shifting between the Sierras and the Hindu Kush, where her brother had made his final stand. Dawn brought deteriorating conditions. The storm system had arrived in full force, winds gusting to 40 miles per hour, driving snow, reducing visibility to less than 100 yards. Emily emerged from the shelter to find Chen hunched over the radio, attempting to make contact with a command. Storm's interfering with transmission, he reported, frustration evident in his voice. Can't get a clear signal. Emily assessed the situation with growing concern. Their mission parameters required them to maintain regular communication, reporting observations, and receiving updated instructions. Failure to do so could be interpreted as a mission compromise. Keep trying, she instructed, turning her attention to their immediate environment. The snow had accumulated significantly overnight, partially burying their hide. While this improved concealment, it also created new challenges. Potential moisture intrusion into their equipment, increased risk of hypothermia, and greater difficulty in observing their sector. They worked together to reinforce their position, clearing snow from critical areas while maintaining tactical discipline. The training scenario called for absolute stealth, no fires, minimal movement outside the hide, strict noise, and light discipline. These restrictions, combined with the deteriorating weather, created conditions at the edge of human endurance. By mid-morning, the Chen finally established brief radio contact with command. "Be advised." The static-laden voice of Sergeant Miller came through. "Exercise parameters updated due to weather conditions. Storm front advancing faster than predicted. Sustained winds of 50 to 60 miles per hour expected within 6 hours. Temperature dropped to -10 with wind chill." Emily and Chen exchanged concerned glances. Such conditions approached survival limits even with their specialized gear. "Further instructions," Chen requested. "Maintain position," Miller responded. "Complete original mission parameters. Extraction timeline unchanged. Command out." As the radio fell silent, Chen looked to Emily. "They're testing our limits, seeing if we'll call for early extraction." Emily nodded, understanding the psychological component of the test. "We stick to the mission." They settled into their observation routine, alternating watches while fighting the relentless cold. The valley below remained obscured most of the day, occasional breaks in the snowfall offering brief glimpses of their target area. No activity was visible, another element of the test, perhaps forcing them to maintain vigilance despite the absence of obvious threats. As predicted, conditions worsened through the afternoon. The wind intensified, howling across the exposed slopes and driving snow into every crevice of their hide despite their best efforts at sealing it. The temperature continued to drop, cold, penetrating even their specialized Arctic gear. "This is beyond training parameters," Chen observed during a particularly vicious gust that threatened to collapse part of their shelter. "They're pushing safety limits." Emily silently agreed, recognizing the increasing danger of their situation. But she also understood the purpose. Snipers often operated at the boundaries of human endurance in conditions that would defeat most soldiers. Their ability to function effectively despite environmental extremes was as important as marksmanship or tactical knowledge. "We adjust and endure," she replied, her voice firm, despite the violent shivers that periodically racked her body. "That's the test." As darkness fell on their second night, the storm reached its peak intensity. Winds screamed across the mountainside, temperatures plummeted to negative numbers, and the snow fell so heavily that maintaining any meaningful observation became impossible. They retreated to their shelter, reinforcing it against the onslaught while preserving energy and body heat. The night passed in a brutal cycle of brief rest periods interrupted by necessary maintenance of their position and equipment. Snow continuously threatened to bury them, requiring regular clearing to prevent complete entombment. The cold became an entity unto itself, a predator seeking entry through any vulnerability in their defenses. Emily found herself drawing on reserves of endurance she hadn't known she possessed. Her smaller body mass worked against her in these conditions, losing heat more rapidly than Chen's larger frame. Yet she refused to acknowledge the disadvantage, channeling her focus into the methodical processes that ensured survival. Controlling breathing, maintaining subtle movement to generate heat, strategically positioning her body to maximize thermal efficiency. Shortly after midnight, Chen attempted another radio check with command. This time there was no response either. The storm had completely disrupted communications, or the exercise controllers were deliberately maintaining silence to increase pressure on the candidates. "No contact," Chen reported, his face illuminated briefly by the radio's display. "We're on our own until this breaks." Emily nodded, unsurprised. "Get some rest. I'll take watch." "There's nothing to see out there," Chen pointed out. "Complete whiteout." "Protocol says we maintain observation," Emily replied simply. "So we maintain observation." Chen didn't argue, recognizing the principle at stake. In actual combat operations, adherence to protocol could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. They were being evaluated not just on their ability to endure the conditions, but on their discipline in following procedures even when they seemed pointless. The night dragged on, the storm's fury unabated. During her watch period, Emily regularly cleared the observation port, more a symbolic gesture than a practical necessity given the zero visibility. Her thoughts returned often to her brother, to the mission that awaited beyond this training. Each hardship endured here was preparation for the real challenge to come. Sometime in the pre-dawn hours, Emily noticed a change in Chen's breathing pattern, the rhythm becoming irregular with occasional gaps followed by gasping inhalations. Recognition came immediately, the early signs of hypothermia affecting respiratory function. She moved to his side, checking his condition with practiced movements. His skin was cold to the touch, his responses sluggish when she roused him. "Chen," she said firmly, close to his ear, to be heard over the howling wind, "you're showing hypothermia symptoms. We need to address it now." His eyes opened, confusion evident, before clarity slowly returned. "I'm fine," he mumbled. "Just tired." "Not fine," Emily contradicted, already implementing cold weather medical protocols. She rearranged their gear to create a more insulated space, positioned Chen in the recovery position, and used her own body heat to supplement his failing thermal regulation. Protocol dictated reporting medical emergencies to command immediately, but with communications down, the decision fell to her alone. The situation presented a critical dilemma: call for emergency extraction, effectively ending their participation in the final exercise, or attempt to manage Chen's condition with available resources and continue the mission. Emily evaluated the factors methodically. Chen's hypothermia was in the early to moderate stage, serious, but not yet life-threatening if properly addressed. Their supplies included chemical heat packs and emergency thermal blankets, temporarily adequate for stabilizing his condition. The storm, while severe, showed subtle signs of diminishing intensity by morning. She made her decision: they would weather the night, reassess at first light, and call for extraction only if Chen's condition deteriorated further. It was a calculated risk, balancing mission completion against safety considerations, exactly the type of field judgment snipers were often required to make. Through the remaining hours of darkness, Emily maintained constant vigilance over both their tactical position and Chen's medical status. She activated chemical heat packs, positioned them strategically to warm core areas, and monitored his vital signs while continuing to clear snow from critical areas of their hide. By dawn, her efforts had produced results. Chen's condition had stabilized, his body temperature rising to safer levels, his awareness returning to normal. The storm, too, had begun to abate, the howling winds diminishing to occasional gusts, the snowfall lightening from blizzard to steady flurries. "What happened?" Chen asked, fully alert now, as they shared a meager breakfast of frozen ration bars. "Moderate hypothermia," Emily explained. "You were starting to exhibit decreased consciousness and irregular breathing." Chen absorbed this with a grim expression. "You should have called for extraction." "Wasn't necessary," Emily replied. "Your condition was manageable with our supplies, and communications were down anyway." The truth, which both recognized but neither voiced, was that calling for extraction would have meant failure of the final exercise for both of them. Emily had made a calculated decision to continue the mission, gambling that she could stabilize Chen's condition without external intervention. "Thank you," Chen said simply. Emily nodded acknowledgement, then turned her attention to their tactical situation. As the storm continued to clear, visibility gradually improved, revealing the valley below transformed by the blizzard. Snow blanketed everything, drifts reaching several feet deep, in places the landscape rendered almost unrecognizable. "Movement," Chen suddenly whispered, now positioned at the observation port with the spotting scope. "Valley floor near the eastern tree line." Emily joined him, her rifle at the ready. Through her scope, she could see what had caught his attention. Figures moving through the snow, establishing positions that simulated an enemy encampment. The exercise scenario was finally activating, presenting them with the targets they had endured 2 days of extreme conditions to identify. 4 personnel, Chen counted, setting up what appears to be a command post, range approximately 800 yards. Emily calculated the firing solution mentally, accounting for elevation, temperature, wind, and the effects of extreme cold on ballistics. The distance was well within her operational range, but the environmental factors created significant challenges. Cold affected bullet velocity, extreme temperature differentials between their heated breath and the frozen barrel could impact accuracy, and the gusty wind conditions required complex compensation. "Confirmed," she responded, establishing firing data. For the next hour, they meticulously documented the target area, recording personnel movements, identifying apparent leadership figures, and calculating firing solutions for potential engagement. This was the core of the evaluation, demonstrating their ability to gather accurate intelligence and prepare for precision fire missions, despite the adverse conditions they had endured. The radio crackled unexpectedly, Miller's voice cutting through the static. All teams be advised, scenario update. High-value target expected at objective area within 1 hour. Positive identification and simulated elimination required for mission completion. Acknowledge. Chen transmitted their acknowledgement while Emily continued observation. The high-value target would likely be an instructor playing the role of an enemy commander, the primary objective they had endured the brutal conditions to engage. They're testing our shooting under extreme stress, Chen noted. 2 nights of minimal sleep, hypothermia recovery, compromised physical condition, and now we need to make a critical shot. Emily nodded, understanding the methodology. Real-world sniper operations rarely occurred under ideal conditions. The ability to execute precision fire despite physical deterioration was an essential skill, one that couldn't be evaluated except by pushing candidates to their limits. She began her preparation ritual, the familiar sequence of actions centering her focus despite fatigue and discomfort. Checking the rifle, confirming the zero hadn't been affected by the extreme conditions. Calculating firing data for various points in the target area. Establishing breathing rhythm to steady her platform despite the occasional tremors of cold that still ran through her body. An hour passed, then another, with no sign of the promised high-value target. The delay was another psychological pressure tactic, forcing them to maintain vigilance despite growing fatigue. Emily and Chen rotated observation duties, each taking 30-minute shifts to preserve energy and attention. During her third shift, Emily noticed a subtle change in the pattern of activity below. The personnel at the simulated command post adjusted their positions, creating a more formal arrangement that suggested preparation for someone important. Minutes later, a new figure appeared, approaching from the western edge of the encampment. "Potential HVT," she whispered to Chen, moving into the command area now. Chen focused the spotting scope, confirming her observation. "Matches the profile. Range 840 yards, wind gusting from the northwest at approximately 12 to 15 miles per hour." Emily made final adjustments to her firing solution, accounting for the updated wind data and the slightly extended range. Despite 2 days of physical hardship, her hands remained steady as she positioned the rifle, her breathing controlled and rhythmic. The figure below paused in a clearing, seemingly reviewing something with the other personnel, a perfect opportunity for a shot. Emily settled into her natural point of aim, finding the space between heartbeats where maximum stability existed. Her finger took up the slack in the trigger. In that moment of perfect focus, a sudden, powerful gust of wind hit their position, sending a shower of snow cascading from an overhanging pine branch directly onto Emily and her rifle. The distraction was momentary but significant, breaking her concentration and temporarily obscuring her sight picture. A less experienced shooter might have rushed to reacquire the target, potentially compromising the shot. Emily instead reset completely calmly, clearing the snow from her optic, reestablishing her position, and rebuilding her firing solution from scratch. The delay cost valuable seconds, but ensured that when she finally pressed the trigger, the round would find its mark. The rifle cracked, the sound sharp in the cold mountain air. Through her scope, Emily watched the training round impact exactly as calculated, striking the target squarely in the center mass. The figure below reacted appropriately to the simulation, hit the exercise controllers immediately, signaling confirmation of the successful engagement. "Target down," Chen confirmed through the spotting scope. Perfect shot despite the interference. Emily cycled the bolt, chambering another round out of habit, though the primary mission was complete. Maintain observation. There could be additional scenarios. They continued their surveillance for another hour, but no further targets appeared. Finally, the radio activated, with Miller's voice delivering the conclusion they had anticipated. "All teams, exercise complete. Prepare for extraction at designated coordinates. Pick up in 3 hours." The 72-hour ordeal was over. They had endured extreme conditions, overcome physical adversity, and successfully completed the assigned mission. As they began dismantling their hide and packing equipment, Emily felt a complex mixture of emotions: satisfaction at their performance, relief at the coming end to the physical hardship, and growing anticipation of what would follow program completion. Chen, fully recovered from his hypothermia episode, worked alongside her with efficient movements despite evident fatigue. "That was one hell of a shot," he commented as they prepared to move out. With the snow interruption and the wind shift, most candidates would have missed or at least been off-center. Emily secured her rifle in its case, her movements precise despite exhausted muscles. The shot is never just about the moment you pull the trigger. It's about how you recover when everything goes wrong. Chen nodded, recognizing the deeper truth in her statement, one that applied to their entire experience in the program. Success had come not from avoiding difficulties, but from adapting to them, from finding ways to complete the mission, despite obstacles that might have defeated others. They departed the hide position that had been their home for 3 brutal days, beginning the trek to the extraction point 5 miles distant. The journey would normally have been challenging enough with their heavy packs and the accumulated fatigue of the exercise. The deep snow left by the blizzard transformed it into a grueling ordeal, each step requiring significant effort as they post-holed through drifts, sometimes reaching mid-thigh. 2 hours into their march, they crested a ridge and encountered an unexpected sight: Master Sergeant Blackwood waiting beside a snowmobile, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts as he observed their approach. "Took you long enough?" he commented dryly as they reached his position. "Transport's waiting at the base of the mountain. This will get you there faster." Emily and Chen exchanged glances, uncertain whether this was standard procedure or special accommodation. Blackwood seemed to read their thoughts. "All candidates are getting mechanized transport from checkpoint positions," he explained. "Storm altered the extraction timeline. Command wants everyone off the mountain before the next front hits." They loaded their gear onto the snowmobile's sled attachment, then mounted the vehicle with Blackwood at the controls. As they descended the snow-covered slopes, the mountain scenery passing in a white blur, Emily found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point. 12 weeks earlier, she had arrived at the Scout Sniper School, facing almost universal skepticism, her small stature and gender marking her as an unlikely candidate in the eyes of instructors and fellow trainees alike. Now, having endured the same challenges as her peers, often at greater physical disadvantage, she approached the program's conclusion with the quiet confidence of someone who had proven herself not through words, but through consistent performance. At the base of the mountain, a transport helicopter waited on a makeshift landing zone cleared of snow. 3 other teams had already arrived, the candidates looking as exhausted as Emily felt, hollow-eyed faces windburned, and chapped movements slow with accumulated fatigue. Thompson nodded a wordless greeting as they approached, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable weeks earlier. The flight back to base passed in near silence, most candidates too exhausted for conversation. Emily gazed out the window at the mountains receding behind them, aware that this phase of her journey was ending, but a more significant one was about to begin. If she had passed the final evaluation, and all indications suggested she had, her request for assignment to the counter-sniper unit in Afghanistan would likely be approved. The mission her brother had begun would become hers to complete. The thought brought both apprehension and a sense of purpose sharper than any she had previously known. The Scout Sniper School graduation ceremony was held 3 days later, following detailed debriefs of the mountain exercise and final evaluations of each candidate's overall performance. Of the 25 who had begun the program, only 10 remained to receive their certification. Emily Walker stood among them, the only woman in a line of weathered, proud faces. Captain Harrison addressed the small gathering of instructors, graduates, and a few family members permitted to attend the otherwise closed ceremony. "The graduates before you represent the pinnacle of precision shooting capability within our armed forces," he stated, his voice carrying across the parade ground where they had first assembled 12 weeks earlier. "They have demonstrated not merely technical proficiency with a rifle, but the full spectrum of skills that define the modern sniper: intelligence gathering, tactical movement, environmental adaptation, and above all, the judgment to make critical decisions under extreme pressure." He paced before the formation, his gaze touching on each graduate in turn. "Each of these snipers has been tested to their limits and beyond. Each has proven their ability to complete the mission regardless of obstacles. They leave here not as the people who arrived 12 weeks ago, but as something more: specialized assets capable of delivering precision effects at ranges and under conditions that would defeat conventional forces." The formal presentation of certificates followed, each graduate stepping forward to receive the documentation of their achievement. When Emily's turn came, she approached Captain Harrison with the same disciplined bearing she had maintained throughout the program. Walker, Harrison said as he presented her certificate, adding in a lower voice meant only for her, exceptional performance in the mountain phase. Your handling of candidate Chen's medical situation while maintaining mission focus demonstrated exactly the judgment we look for. Emily accepted the certificate with a crisp, "Thank you, sir," revealing nothing of the satisfaction his words engendered. She had gambled correctly in choosing to manage Chen's condition, rather than calling for extraction, a decision that might have gone catastrophically wrong, but instead had validated her ability to balance mission requirements against personnel welfare. Following the ceremony, Master Sergeant Blackwood approached her as the formation dispersed. "A moment, Walker," he requested, gesturing toward a quieter area away from the dispersing crowd. When they were alone, Blackwood handed her a sealed envelope. "Your orders," he explained, "effective immediately upon completion of post-graduation leave. The counter-sniper unit in Helmand Province, just as you requested." Emily accepted the envelope, a mixture of emotions coursing through her. This was what she had worked toward. Yet the reality of it, the imminent deployment to the region where her brother had been killed, carried a weight she could feel physically. "Thank you, Master Sergeant." Blackwood studied her with his pale, weathered eyes. "This isn't just about your brother, is it?" Emily met his gaze directly. "No, sir. It's about completing a mission that needs completing, protecting our people from a threat that's still active." "Good," Blackwood nodded, "because vengeance is a terrible foundation for operational effectiveness. I've seen too many good soldiers destroyed by it." He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. "Your father understood that. So did your brother, from everything I've heard about him. They were professionals first, with personal feelings kept firmly in check." "I understand the distinction," Emily assured him. "See that you maintain it," Blackwood advised, "especially when you're in country facing the realities of the environment where your brother was lost." Emily nodded, acknowledging the wisdom in his caution. "Will you be part of the deployment, Master Sergeant?" A rare smile crossed Blackwood's weathered features. "As a matter of fact, I will. Command approved my request for reassignment as the unit's senior training advisor. Seems they want someone with experience to help integrate our newest sniper into operational protocols." The news brought unexpected relief. Having Blackwood's steady presence and institutional knowledge would be an invaluable asset in the challenging deployment ahead. "When do we deploy?" she asked. 2 weeks, Blackwood replied. "Just enough time for post-graduation leave. Enjoy it, Walker. Get some rest, spend time with family. Once we're in Helmand, those opportunities become scarce." As they parted ways, Emily found Chen waiting near the barracks, his gear packed for departure. "Got your orders?" he inquired. Emily nodded, holding up the sealed envelope. "Helmand Province, counter-sniper unit." "Same," Chen revealed with a slight smile. "Apparently they're keeping our team intact. Command was impressed with our performance in the mountain phase." The news was another welcome development. Having Chen as her spotter, someone with whom she had already developed operational rapport, would significantly enhance their effectiveness in the field. "When do you head out?" she asked. "Flight to San Diego tonight," Chen replied. 2 weeks leave, then reporting to Fort Bragg for pre-deployment processing. He extended his hand. "See you on the other side, Walker." Emily shook his hand, the gesture simple but laden with meaning after all they had endured together. "On the other side," she agreed. Helmand Province, Afghanistan. 4 months later, the Afghan night wrapped around Emily like a familiar shroud, the cold mountain air carrying scents of pine and distant wood smoke. From her concealed position on a rocky ridge, she had a commanding view of the valley below, where intelligence suggested a high-value target would be moving within the hour. 4 months into her deployment with the counter-sniper unit, Emily Walker had already earned a reputation among American forces in the region. 3 confirmed enemy snipers eliminated multiple ambush positions, identified before they could be utilized, and intelligence gathering that had prevented at least 2 major attacks on coalition forces. Yet her primary mission, locating and neutralizing the elusive enemy sniper known as Crescent Moon, remained unfulfilled. Until now, perhaps. "Ghost Eye, this is Overwatch Actual," Blackwood's voice came through her earpiece. "Intel confirms HVT is en route to the compound. ETA 15 minutes. Multiple vehicles, heavy security. Priority target is believed to be present." "Copy Overwatch Actual," Emily responded, her voice barely above a whisper, though she was alone in her hide position. Chen was positioned 2 ridges over, providing secondary coverage of the valley's eastern approach. Priority target was their code for Crescent Moon, the sniper responsible for David Walker's death and those of numerous other American servicemen. After months of painstaking intelligence gathering, they had finally identified his probable identity, a former Russian Special Forces operator, now working as a contractor for various insurgent groups. His trademark was a curved scar that ran from the corner of his right eye to his jawline, hence the nickname. Emily adjusted her position slightly, checking her firing data once more. Range to the compound entrance, 187 yards. Wind variable primarily from the northwest at approximately 8 to 12 mmHg. Temperature 38 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 30%. Barometric pressure stable. All factors calculated and compensated for in her firing solution. The wait was the hardest part, maintaining perfect stillness and focus despite the tension of anticipation. Emily had learned from her father, her brother, and her own experience that patience was a sniper's greatest weapon. She controlled her breathing, keeping her heart rate steady, her mind clear of distractions. Headlights appeared in the distance, winding slowly up the valley road toward the compound. 3 vehicles, 2 technical trucks with mounted weapons, front and rear, and a nondescript SUV in the middle. Classic security configuration for a high-value individual. Movement on your sector, Chen reported from his position. Convoy approaching from the east. 3 vehicles matching expected profile. Confirmed visual, Emily responded. Standing by. Through her scope, Emily watched as the vehicles approached the compound. The perimeter guards increased their vigilance, taking up defensive positions as the gates were opened to admit the convoy. The vehicles entered slowly, stopping in the central courtyard. Maintain standby, Blackwood instructed. Confirm identity before engagement. The doors of the lead and rear vehicles opened, first armed men emerging to secure the area before the center SUV's door was opened. A tall figure stepped out, surrounded immediately by bodyguards who attempted to shield him from any observation. Emily's pulse quickened slightly as she caught a glimpse of the man's face through a gap in the security formation. There, clearly visible, even at this distance through her high-powered optic, was the distinctive curved scar. Target confirmed, she whispered. I have visual ID on Crescent Moon. You are cleared to engage when you have a clean shot. Blackwood replied, his voice tense but controlled. Ghost Eye, make it count. Emily tracked the target as he moved toward the main building, calculating his pace, anticipating his path. The security team maintained tight formation around him, making a clear shot nearly impossible. She would need to wait for the perfect moment, perhaps when he entered the building, pausing briefly in the doorway. As if reading her thoughts, the group slowed as they approached the entrance. One of the guards stepped forward to open the door, and for a brief instant, the target was partially exposed. It wasn't a perfect shot. His torso was still partially obscured by a guard's shoulder, but it might be the only opportunity she would get. Emily made a split-second adjustment to her aim point, compensating for the partial obstruction and the slight angle. In the space between heartbeats, as her finger took up the trigger, a momentary image flashed through her mind. Her brother David, perhaps in a similar position years earlier, tracking this same man. The thought didn't disturb her concentration. Instead, it seemed to sharpen it, bringing absolute clarity to the moment. The rifle recoiled against her shoulder, the sound of the shot lost in the vastness of the valley. Through her scope, she watched as the target suddenly staggered, clutching his chest before collapsing. The security team erupted into chaotic movement, some dragging the fallen man inside, others scanning frantically for the source of the shot. Target down, Emily reported calmly. Center mass hit. Security in disarray. Confirmed hit. Chen's voice came through tight with controlled excitement. Clean shot, Ghost Eye. Beginning exfil now. Emily initiated her own extraction protocol, rapidly breaking down her position while maintaining awareness of her surroundings. The shot would draw immediate response, with enemy forces likely already moving to search the surrounding highlands. 20 minutes later, she reached the predetermined rendezvous point where Blackwood waited with their extraction vehicle, a nondescript truck that would blend with local traffic on the journey back to base. Target confirmed, neutralized, Blackwood informed her as she secured her equipment in the hidden compartment. Our asset inside the compound reports he was dead before they got him through the door. 1 shot, 1 kill from over 1,000 yards. Your father would be proud, Walker. Emily nodded, feeling a complex mixture of emotions, professional satisfaction at completing the mission successfully, relief that a significant threat had been eliminated, but not the personal triumph or vindication she might once have expected. David's death had been avenged, but that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that other American soldiers would return home safely because of what she had accomplished tonight. "Mission complete," she said simply. "Let's go home." 1 week later, Emily sat in the mess tent at their forward operating base, cleaning her rifle with the meticulous care that had become second nature. The news of Crescent Moon's elimination had spread quickly through coalition forces, though few knew the identity of the sniper responsible. Ghost Eye remained a call sign known to only a select few. Chen approached carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Briefing in 20 minutes, he said, setting 1 cup beside her. "Command wants a complete after-action report. Word is Joint Special Operations Command has taken notice of our little unit." Emily nodded her thanks for the coffee, continuing her maintenance routine. "Any word on the next deployment?" "Nothing specific yet, but there's a situation developing near the Pakistan border that might require our particular skill set." Chen hesitated, then added, "We also have visitors. SEAL team just arrived for joint operations planning. One of them's been asking about Ghost Eye." Emily looked up, surprise momentarily breaking through her professional demeanor. "What's SEAL team, Patem?" "Team 3. They were hit pretty hard last month in the Northern Valley. Lost 2 men to enemy fire before some guardian angel apparently saved the rest of them with what they're calling the most incredible long-range shooting they have ever seen." Emily's pulse quickened slightly. She had been deployed on Overwatch for a SEAL operation in that area, though she hadn't known which team was involved. The engagement had been brief but intense, multiple enemy fighters eliminated at extreme ranges under difficult conditions. "What does this SEAL want?" she asked, resuming her work on the rifle. "To thank whoever saved his team, I think," Chen replied. "Lieutenant Commander Richards is his name. Says he owes Ghost Eye a debt he can never repay." Emily paused, a memory surfacing from her brother's letters. David had mentioned a Richards, a junior officer he'd served with briefly before his final deployment. "Tell him Ghost Eye was just doing the job," she said quietly. "Same as any of us would, any of us." Well, Chen studied her for a moment. "You know, at some point, you might have to accept that what you do isn't just the job. What you can do with that rifle, the lives you've saved, it's something special, Walker." Emily finished reassembling her weapon, her movements precise and practiced. "My father used to say a sniper's value isn't measured by targets eliminated, but by teammates protected. I'm just carrying on the family business." Chen smiled, recognizing the rare moment of personal disclosure. "Well, your family business has a hell of a reputation. The SEALs have started calling you Ghost Eye in their official reports. Seems the name is sticking." As they walked toward the briefing room, Emily felt a sense of completion that had eluded her since her brother's death. She had not only finished what David had started, but had begun to create her own legacy. One defined not by vengeance or personal achievement, but by the same principles her father and brother had embodied: precision, discipline, and unwavering commitment to protecting their fellow soldiers. Ghost Eye was no longer just a call sign. It had become a promise that no matter how dire the situation, no matter how impossible the shot might seem, someone was watching over America's warriors from the shadows. Someone they might never see, but who would never let them fall, while she had breath in her body and a rifle in her hands. Emily Walker had become what everyone said was impossible, not just a woman who could stand among the military's deadliest snipers, but a legend in her own right. Ghost Eye, the sniper nobody believed until she saved the SEALs.